Good morning. Today is Thursday, February the 20th. This Committee of Finance, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is called to order. Madam Clerk, please share the roll. Here.
Present.
Thank you. Finance Director, and I know that we don't require them to be here, but if any of the judges want to join, they're welcome to be here as well.
Sure. To the chair, we don't have. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, if you could read it in, I apologize. Thank you.
Page 110, Cleveland Municipal Court, Housing, W. Monet Scott, Judge. Page 116, Salaries and Wages, 2024 unaudited, $3,415,400. 2025 budgeted, $4,220,251. Page 117, total expenditures, 2024 unaudited, $4,880,253. 2025 budgeted, $6,322,961. Page 119, number of employees, December of 2024, 47. Budgeted 2025, 53, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Director.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair. We have no comments on this, and we also have some folks from the courts that can introduce themselves.
Thank you. If we could have our illustrious judge, Housing Court, introduce herself and her team.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council President Griffin and the rest of City Council members. I am W. Monet Scott, the Administrative Judge for Cleveland Municipal Court Housing Division. I have also at the table with me Michael Cummins, my Chief Financial Officer, and we are prepared to take questions. This is a little bit different this year, how this is being conducted. We're usually with the court, and my understanding is General Division and the clerk, of course, will be attending tomorrow morning. But I don't know if this is the moment where I do like an opening statement.
Yeah, the floor is yours, Judge.
All right.
And our apologies, we changed up our entire format a little bit to try to be more efficient on budget issues.
Right.
But please, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. I did send over a package of some data information to give City Council a look inside of what's been going on for the 6 years that I've been the administrative judge. So good morning, Cleveland Council members. I want to begin by saying Happy New Year and thank you for allowing Cleveland Housing Court to present its 2025 budget. As you know, I sent it to the bench on January 2nd of 2020. At that time, I had a little over 2.5 months before the pandemic occurred and was faced with mandates from my boss, the Ohio Supreme Court. I had to state all of the cases pending on the court's criminal and civil docket when the pandemic hit. We were instructed to convert an in-person court into a virtual one within weeks. Grant money was immediately given to the courts to purchase equipment needed to create a virtual environment. In March 2020, I and a small team of my leadership staff chose the necessary tech equipment. We chose Zoom as our virtual platform as it was the most user-friendly when thinking about the public. We created local rules, drafted and filed administrative orders, and created new processes with the desire to keep everyone safe from COVID-19. I want to thank all of you for your hard work you do as the legislative branch, passing new codified ordinances, allocating money to ensure that the city of Cleveland continues to be a modern-day city. Some of the things I've done as a judge to strongly support the innovative laws and monetary assistance passed by Cleveland City Council. We start with right to counsel. That took effect on July 2020. Prior to that, I met with the United Way and legal aid to ensure that qualifying tenants had knowledge and access to counsel during the eviction process. There also was, that was done by making sure, how does connecting with legal aid look virtually? Everyone was used to being prepared to, meet with each other. Prior to that, in person, doing breakout rooms, seeing if people qualified, but we had to change the entire thing about how does that look. And not only that, we had to stay cases for about 90 days, meaning that nothing could move through the court. And when that process went into place, President Trump, his first term, mandated a moratorium to stop evictions. The city of Cleveland did receive, I think in the first rollout, $11.5 million for COVID-19 rental assistance. Department of Building and Housing, CHN, and Legal Aid was concerned about how that looks, about getting people connected. Again, there was no blueprint or design for us to do that. We had to come up with a way to make sure the most vulnerable people were prioritized, and those were the people that were facing evictions within the court. We did eventually help disperse that large amount of money, and you will see within your handout from 2020 all the way down to 2024, the number of evictions declined. To assist with that process, I created cross-training for all of my staff, and my housing court specialists became mediators along with their other duties as housing court. We've continued by opening kiosks at the Cleveland Public Libraries and some of the council members' districts, and then also have a kiosk in the court on the 13th floor and on the 3rd floor. Those are some of the things that we've been doing, but not to I'd be remiss if I don't talk about some of the things that I'm doing with the criminal docket with the new first residence law that was just recently passed and took effect. I've streamlined my community service, which is probation, to ensure that every property in the city of Cleveland are in good standing and meet the goals that they are in full code compliance, whether it is health, zoning, building and housing, or fire codes. I ensure that if one property comes on by an investor owner, comes onto my docket, all of those properties owned by that individual or that LLC comes under my jurisdiction. And so I do an overall screening of them to make sure that they don't have any open violation notice, that they don't have any open building permits, that they've paid for their building permits, that they have their, if they're rental properties, that they now have the CAIRO, which is the Certificate of Proven Rental Occupancy, that they have their lead safe certificates, that their property taxes are paid, and that they do not recidivate while they're on my docket and violate probation. That has been a very strategic and streamlined process with the help of my housing court specialists who are also trained probation officers. We have strategized to make sure that once they come onto the court's docket regarding probation, that they are not on there for the maximum 5 years. The sooner we get them off, the better we have property out there for people to rent, healthy and safe property for individuals to rent. That's a little insight of what's been going on over at housing court. If you have any questions, I am here to respond.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I apologize. I'm getting a lot of messages from people that the weather is holding folks up, and I know it held me up from getting here in a timely manner, too. So please, apologies for some of the slowness of some folks getting here. But first and foremost, I have to commend you because what you've done with the Shaker buildings over there has just been very transformational. And, one of the things that we have tried to move to is operational, so we want to try to stick more to the budget. However, I do want to ask you, how does that work? Because I think the model that you have used and that the law department is using to hold these out-of-town LLCs accountable is important. And I would love for you to share briefly the platform and how you're using that platform in order to address that.
Thank you, Council President Griffin. So my concern when I took the bench was, of course, I'm a resident of Cleveland. I was a fair housing administrator. I was also a prosecutor in all of the majority of the units with the county. But it was about accountability. And so what does that look like? Well, I went back to see what do I have jurisdiction to do? If the Cleveland Codified Ordinance says that they have to do certificate of disclosures, let's just start there, when they are selling houses back and forth. I would ask them, because what was happening was people were selling houses when they got a citation to come before the court. And the court, the code enforcement prosecutors would just kind of do all of these pre-trials, and then those of them doing pre-trials with these defendants, they would sell the property, flip the property. Okay, but the court can't get involved with pre-trial. That's between the prosecutors and the defendant. But what I wasn't understanding was, did the prosecutors know they were interested in selling the properties? And if so, then that should have prompted them to move this a little bit faster. And since they sold the property and now you're coming before the court to ask for either a dismissal because they no longer have jurisdiction over the property, that makes no sense to me. Or you're asking for a very nominal plea if you've issued 75 counts and you're asking they plead to just one. The fact is they sold property, they immediately flipped it, and did they do the certificate of disclosure? Well, they didn't think about that. That's the code enforcement prosecutors. So what I want them to do now is about accountability. I do get input from, when I'm sentencing, from the community. I can say Councilwoman Spencer and Heather Lazar have been one of the most prevalent people in there with houses that are in their ward. But I've also dealt with Councilman Polenzek, and I think we've dealt with Councilwoman Meyer, Councilwoman Gray, that have come to advocate about problematic properties in their wards. Also, Councilman Harrison, and then also Councilman Casey, I believe, we've dealt with dealing with properties that are in their wards. So our goal is to make sure that everything is in order. The first thing, starting with open violations. If there are violation notice, you got to just abate the violations according to the inspectors. And we try to see if they have the resources to do that, and then my department, my team, my housing court specialists organize them in a way, especially for those defendants that have bulk property. We organize them in a way to make sure that you see each property for what it is. Open violations, do they have, let's say, certificates? It's like an Excel spreadsheet. And you'll be amazed at how many people own a lot of properties and have no clue on exactly how many properties they own and what's going on with that property individually when it comes to the City of Cleveland, Department of Building and Housing and Health.
That's awesome. The reason I wanted you to say that is because I think that it's really unfortunate that we have a media that don't tell stories like this. I mean, this is government working. This is government working for people who have been taken advantage of by, people outside of our territory. And oftentimes, I just don't see people telling that story. So I just really wanted to give you an opportunity to say that. It also is a testament to showing, excuse me, I'm batting just a little bit of cold today. It also shows, a testament of how the law director was talking the other day about how they try to circumvent local courts in order to go to the federal court. Mm-hmm. And it's why we really need to advocate for these cases to stay in housing court, because I think we're one of a few cities that do have a housing court.
Yes.
So the fact that we're holding people accountable, I really hope that some reporter picks up on this and tells that story, because it's really, I've seen it up close and personal, but I think people need to know about that. I have a couple of questions. Councilman Michael Polenzek, Councilman Brian Casey, Councilwoman Rebecca Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues. Nice to see you, Judge.
Good morning.
As I've reported before, as I've mentioned on the floor, council, and here at the table, the number one complaint into my office over the years and still is based on housing complaints, absentee landlords, conditions of property. and in general, just the concerns of a lot of long-term residents and long-term neighbors as it pertains, as the council president indicated, these folks that are coming in and just buying up everything they can. And not only that, but I must get several calls a week. Do I want to sell my house? I get the cards in the mail, and best one now I'm getting cards where they got the picture of my house on the card, or on in the letter, which really does not make me warm and fuzzy when they're sending me pictures of my own house, asking if I want to sell it. But nonetheless, I'm dealing today, as I sit here, I'm dealing with landlords from China, from England, from all over the country, Ukraine. I'm dealing with a group, a company that's buying up, they're from Brussels, Belgium, buying up properties in the Collinwood Village community. And then couples from France buying up properties in the Waterloo Arts District. In my time here as a senior member, I've never, ever experienced that. In the day, I would, Mr. and Mrs. Jones owned a home. And I know who Mr. and Mrs. Jones was, even if they didn't live there, but there was an address that I could identify with. Now I'm dealing with people from all over the world, which I don't understand, first of all, how this is allowed in this country, because I don't know if Americans can buy properties in these other countries as well. I'm not clear of what the international laws are. But we got this, we're being descended upon by these speculators, and in many cases, I'm finding they're coming in and paying cash. They're paying cash for these houses. And when I met with the couple from France, what did they tell me, who were buying up houses in the Waterloo Arts District, that they pointed to a house in the neighborhood, because I was out on the sidewalk, and they said, see what that house there, that house in France would be $500,000, if not more. But we're in here, we can buy it for $50,000 or $60,000, and in 4 years, we're going to make our money back. Because the other thing they're doing, they're jacking up all the rents. And we're seeing this collectively across the city, rents steadily increasing to the point where I'm looking at some of the rents for two-bedroom homes in a neighborhood, and I'm just shocked, especially in North Shore Collinwood, what some of the rents have gone up to. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm looking at these rents. That's a house payment, in my opinion, than what some of these folks are paying. So what I'm trying to get to the point, we have more residents today, Judge, than ever that are renters. In fact, I'm told the majority of Cleveland residents today are now renters versus when I was a kid growing up, we were all of our families were homeowners or attempted to be homeowners. And I was just talking to some of my former colleagues, and I can remember my discussions with my late dear friend Stephanie Tubbs Jones, who would tell me, we would talk about how critical it was for our families or our grandparents, the migration up from the South or the migration from Europe was to get that house. That was the thing. You got to own a home. And so what I'm looking at from the standpoint of the court, you know that we've taken action within the council as it pertains to try to stiffen the code. What I'm trying to find out from you, and I have a couple budget questions as well as it pertains to the numbers in here. In fact, let me do that first. On page 116, under professional services, there's a big jump in there. Can someone explain to me what that's about? Under contractual services, professional services.
Sure. So through the chair to the councilman, I will give a brief description, and then if the
Yes.
court CFO would like to respond. So the jump from 49,000 to 225,000 is
Yes.
for interpreting services, pre-employment screenings, physicals, parking garage fees, property record search fees, transcription services, and firearm trainings.
And that would be such a significant increase from what it was last year?
I'm not sure if my CFO, Mr. Common, knows, but I can tell you that this court is firmly under the belief that this having access to the court and having your day in court is about accessibility.
Okay.
And so that is to ensure that those that where English is not their first language, including defendants that own property from out of France, out of China,
Right.
and all of those countries, they will come in here and struggle with the language, and by constitutional rights, even though it may be a LLC, because I require the owner of the LLC, not a property manager, to come before the court when we're facing criminal cases. There is probably a large uptick in interpretation fees. A very large uptick. So every step of the process, on the criminal docket, I know we've had to have specialized interpreters that come on. And then also for those that are renting that struggle with English and don't quite understand the process, we have interpreters come on the civil docket with the evictions.
Okay, thank you. On page 117, under fines, forfeitures, and settlements, the revenue line has dropped, and I would have thought with the number of cases, the uptick in cases, that fines, forfeitures, and settlements, there would have been a significant increase.
I think I have a copy of that.
That's on page 117 under revenues.
It's down 3,000.
$3,000. So, it's my understanding it's down $3,000. There's the decrease in that.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure where the revenue drop is occurring in Cleveland. When we get a printout from the clerk's office,
Okay.
I've noticed that some things are in red. It hasn't really been explained to me because I know the amount of fines that I charge is going to be different from general division, right? It's going to be a maximum fine for one count is $5,000 for LLC. For individual, it's $1,000. Then there's court costs and all of those. Now, depending on what they're before this court for, I prefer not to charge them any fines, especially if it's their first time before the court, because I'd rather that money go back into the property.
Yes, I understand.
And a lot of the defendants are doing what the court has ordered them to do. Rarely do we have instances where those violations have not been met
Okay.
or anything like that. They're paying their property taxes. And so when they come, it's already a little bit of financial distress going on with the defendants. And I choose not to really assert or require them to pay fines, just basic court costs, unless they violate community control. And that's when I start looking at fines.
Okay. The understaffing on page 118, I want to call them the specialists. How are they assigned? Are they assigned on regions? Are they assigned, there's a specialist, and you have 9 here that you're indicating. Are they assigned to wards? They assigned to regions? How are they assigned?
No, they are assigned. They go through my chief housing specialist, Carl Kannenberg. They're assigned based on what his data is showing. And the reason why we don't do that, because it was not really effective. The west side could have less defendants on the criminal docket, and the east side can have more.
Okay.
So if we get into the habit, I had to deal with that as a prosecutor on the felony unit. When you start signing districts awards, some will work way harder than others. And this is really about equity and balance, and that all of them are qualified to handle cases. And it also helps them get to know the city of Cleveland and the different wards and the council members. But it's really about pretty much dealing with defendants and property.
So they're assigned based on number of cases?
They're assigned, how he assigns his, we have a compliance specialist.
Okay.
So that is the one individual that's over bulk property.
Okay.
Those are ones that have 20 plus properties, 10 plus properties. We have a few defendants that have 50 plus properties on the court's docket. Well, you don't want to assign the compliance specialist a lot of cases, because each case requires a lot more effort and energy to organize. But it is based on, and I have some that are specializing. I have one that is specializing in dealing with our hoarders that's on our docket. That requires a lot of time and effort, and working in conjunction with some of the Department of Aging and Department of Building and Housing senior initiatives, inspectors. And so it's really, he allocates to the caseload of each housing specialist.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get zero in on. Do we have enough specialists that are engaged with city council members as it pertains to these cases in their wards? I want to close that gap. I want to make sure that there is as much interaction as there possibly can be with members of city council in these cases that are in their neighborhoods.
City council, every time I come back here, we always extend a welcome for City Council one to engage with us.
Okay.
But we've partnered with some of the city council members for resource clinics. And then we always, the specialists always send out an email or some kind of communication to City Council regarding if they would have any input on the property that's before them.
I think that's important, Judge, because to keep that communications going. I'm very aggressive on housing cases. In fact, I'm dealing with one now in the Collinwood Village area. It has just upset me greatly. That is a condemned structure, and I'm gonna make their life very interesting. The person who owns that property on Lake County. But at the end of the day, we got to strike a balance for our residents as it pertains to these cases and our neighbors. I just want to make sure that we have adequate folks working with members of City Council, working with those issues of great concern to us. And the last point I wanted to ask or direct to you, because you're working with the codified ordinances, is there anything within the codified ordinances that we haven't addressed that you think is critical? We've taken steps through our president and members of the body. We've been engaged as it pertains to looking at the code, working with building and housing. But is there anything else within the codified ordinance that is a hindrance, is a obstacle, is a challenge for you in the process of making sure that the housing code is enforced in this city?
This new Residents First law that was passed,
Right.
I think you solidified the issues we were having earlier. If you recall, I believe the lead safe certification requirement came out you passed it in 2019, but it didn't take effect until 2021.
Yes.
And so then Building and Housing Director Ayanna Blue Donald reached out to us. I think there's a really good understanding that housing court reaches a lot of people when something needs to roll out. And she asked us, could we partner with them to let people know that this lead safe certificate was doing a zip code rollout, if you recall. And it was something that was to take place over a 2-year span. We do know that in order to get an eviction, you have to have certain documents to file a complaint, which is you got to be registered with the Secretary of State. You have to be registered in good standing. You also have to show proof that you own the property. And then you also have to have a rental registration certificate. When I stepped into this role as housing court judge and I started reviewing the eviction cases, I noticed that they would file these complaints, but rental registrations would be expired. And so I started pushing it back to my magistrate saying they're not even proper before the court. So when we talk about the lead safe certificate and the zip code rollout, they asked, and they created, code enforcement and building and housing created this affidavit. We just reviewed it and said that when they came before the court, do you realize that this house has to start having lead safe certification? You've started the process, or you don't have to do the process because this house was built after 1978, or your zip code is not up yet. You understand that you're due to have lead safe,
Yes.
but it's not up yet. And so we did that effort for about 1.5 years until someone challenged it in the Court of Appeals. And it was through the civil cases, and the City of Cleveland's law department did not represent the court because it was a civil matter. But we had a lot of organizations that filed briefs on it. It came back, the 8th District Court of Appeals came back and said that this court, housing court, should not be dabbling in seeing if they have lead safe certification. That's something for the City of Cleveland to do, whether they connect it with the renter registration. So when that 8th District rule came back out, we immediately stopped having them do the affidavits. And then you guys connected in order to get a rental registration. Our properties now, according to the new Residents First law, has to be either registered under the rental registry or vacant property. And if you're registered under a rental registry, you have to now go for your certificate of, I kind of hate that they changed the name because it's just a mouthful, but the CAIRO, Certificate of Proven Rental Occupancy. That's the new rental registration certificate. In order to get that, you must have a lead safe certificate, so they incorporated that back into it. And you have to have updated property tax or be on an approved property tax payment plan. Those things are necessary for you to get a certificate of proven rental occupancy now, and you must now have that effective March 1st of 2025. It's for 1 year, according to Building and Housing. It expires March 1st of 2026. So I think overall, the laws covered it. It is just now, how does it look going into the process and code enforcement prosecutors pursuing?
I just want to make sure that the action that we've taken is addressing the problems that you're experiencing, that we're all experiencing, and if there's any other areas that we need to improve upon, then we need to do that, because this is about neighborhood stability. This is about making sure that our residents feel that the city government and the courts are looking out for their best interests, especially those people who've invested in our neighborhoods, our residents, not these absentee folks that come in to speculate. I want to make sure our people are being protected. So I'll leave it at that point, and I want to thank you, Judge. I look forward to ongoing dialogue and discussions with you. And again, at the end of the day, my residents want the law laid down. They want the code enforced in this city. That's where we're at. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Casey, more harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the judge, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your presence and going over this. And on page 119, I noticed that you are budgeting for 8 less people this year, including 5, getting rid of 5 part-time and eliminating 3 full-time positions. And with that being said, on page 116, your full-time permanent is increasing. So, Mr. Chairman, to the director, whomever, can you give us a brief rundown on the increases? There are increases in salaries?
So I know that some of the part-time positions that we got rid of was we had 3 part-time magistrates. Being a part-time magistrate, we couldn't retain people. With the last 2 that we had are now judges, Judge Saffold and Judge Johnson. But prior to them coming on, we had other part-time magistrates that, tendered resignations because they said it was a bit much for them to handle with all the cases. And so in order for us to be a lot more efficient, because at this point, the case loads were starting to increase, and it was causing the magistrates prior that could easily zip through the cases. But with right to counsel, now there's being more challenges, more objections to magistrates' decisions, more appeals are going across the street. So we thought it was better to eliminate the part-time positions and bring on, I think we created 2 full-time magistrates to take the place of that. And then the housing court deputy bailiff, well, the deputy bailiff part-time position was the warrant recall. I don't issue warrants, I do registration blocks. And that position was a little bit hard to fill also. A lot of people were desiring full-time positions with the court also.
To the chair of the councilman, if you refer to page 119, they had about 9 vacancies on and off throughout the year. So now we're budgeting at full staff, which is now 53 full-time employees.
Okay. And then on page 116, under benefits, we have clothing allowance. And then on 117, under materials and supplies, we have clothing.
So through the chair to the councilman, the 5170 line, the clothing allowance is for 12 bailiffs, their uniforms and footwear. And then yeah, so through the chair to the councilman, the remaining clothing is for everybody else in the court except for the bailiffs that require uniforms.
And just for clarification, you know, council doesn't have the same sheet that you have, so when you say 5170 or those codes,
Right.
Yeah.
no,
I
we
don't
don't
have that
have
sheet
that.
either.
Okay.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, to the finance director, we're saying that aside from the bailiffs, other employees get a clothing allowance at the court.
Through the chair, yes, we purchase the clothing there on the clothing line. That's 10,000. I'm sorry, it's 9,400. And on the clothing allowance, the employee actually buys it, and then we reimburse them. So
Okay.
That's it.
All right. And then, Mr. Chairman, to the CFO, you mentioned, when Councilman Polensek asked about professional services, you mentioned parking. And we also have parking in city facilities on page 116. What's the difference between the parking in the professional services and the parking in city facilities?
To the chair of the councilman, parking, the first parking that we talked about is for Huntington Garage, and then Willard is the parking in city facilities.
Okay. And then I noticed that, Mr. Chairman, to either the judge or the director, that you don't have rent in your budget. And I know 53 employees, I know you have a lot of space over there. I've been over there. Is the housing court not charged rent for use of the Justice Center?
Can I, I just want to say first is housing court is not a standalone court. It's a division under general. So it's Cleveland Municipal Court, and then it is Housing Division.
Right.
Those things such as rent, I believe, it comes through their budget.
Oh, and that was my second question. Does Cleveland Municipal Court pick up the rent for housing court?
Yes,
Is that correct?
well, at least that's my.
Through the chair, I believe that is correct.
Okay. Well, either way, you don't have it in your budget, so you're not paying it, right?
I
So
mean,
that's a
you
good
know,
thing.
we are the,
So-
we really need space if you see the presentation I put. We're-
All right, and then on page 118, do you have a housing court, under staffing, do you have a housing court administrator?
My court administrator, no, I do not.
Okay. And then you're looking for an additional administrative assistant, but there's two line items here that I'd like to go over because we had this issue with another department yesterday. And that is on page 119, your housing court scheduler, where you budgeted for one, but you have two, and your housing court magistrate, where you had 5, but you employed 6. So, Mr. Chairman, to the finance team, we had this discussion yesterday on how can you hire more than you're budgeted for. So can we explain that?
Chair, the councilman, we look at full-time positions in total, so the mix could change throughout the year as long as they don't exceed the total full-time. So if they have a different need and a different title, they're able to hire. They just can't go over they cannot go over the full-time budget of employees or the dollar amount.
Okay. And then one last thing, and I've been saying this for more than 10 years under revenues, right? The courts do not collect money, right? that's what the clerk's office is for. So when Housing Court or Cleveland Muni comes to us with a revenue, that's actually not their revenue. You provide the fines and everything to the clerk's office, and all the revenues, I believe, should be under the clerk's office, and the clerk should be able to break that down to Housing Court and Cleveland Municipal Court. So courts don't actually generate money. Clerk's offices do. So since we're claiming the $680,000 for revenues, and I understand that that's in fines and everything else, what was it, Mr. Chairman, to the judge or the CFOs over here? How much did you actually administer in fines and forfeitures? Because this is the revenue that was collected. So how much did you actually, from the bench, administer in fines and whatever?
To the chair, to Councilman Casey, I don't know the exact number because I issue a journal entry of if there's fines and court costs, and the calculation does go through the clerk's office. So I can give you a guesstimate, but the new case management system is not as good as probably the older case management system. So I would like to know that, like over the year, how much of fines did I issue? I know when I've issued large fines, like I think I had a $25,000 fine that was issued against a defendant LLC, and it was paid for. So I'm aware of those larger fines that I issue, and it's usually tied to a violation of community control. But outside of that, those day-to-day fines, those minor misdemeanors and all of those, I have no clue.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, if we could put that request in for not only a housing court, but tomorrow for municipal court. I just think it would be a fascinating thing to know, how much is actually left out there that's uncollectible, that we could possibly, you're saying 680,000, and maybe you only find 690,000, right? That's a great success rate in collections, right? But how much is actually left out there? And it may not be a question for you, but you may want to know how much you issued in fines and revenues and stuff like that. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rebecca Moore, then Councilman Chris Harsh.
Good morning, Judge. I know I want to echo what my colleagues have said this morning, and thank you for being here. I did have a couple line items I wanted to go over. First of all, could you discuss the increase in the professional services line item from under 100,000 for the last 3 years to 225,000 predicted for 2025? Through the chair.
So through the chair to the councilwoman, I believe we discussed this earlier. This was for interpreting services, pre-employment screens, physicals, parking garage fees, property record search fees, transcription services, and firearm trainings.
And I apologize if I missed that line of questioning when I had to step out. So is the response that essentially we always budget a higher amount and then it just has come in under for the past couple of years, or are you anticipating an increase in expenses? Through the chair.
We have noticed an increase in interpretive services and transcripts. To pay to get transcripts because there may be an uptick in appeals on the criminal docket and the civil docket. If it's on the criminal docket, we're required, if the individual is determined to be indigent, we're required to pay for those transcripts. Depending on what they're appealing and how many hearings we've had, because a lot of the criminal is post-conviction, they will ask for 5 transcripts over the last 5 status hearings, for example. And so we are obligated as a court to pay for those, but then also to provide interpreters for those, whether it's visual, hearing impaired, and language. We have provided that for the court and then ensured that everybody has access to communicate with the court. And so now we've seen an increase in participation with Cleveland Housing Court because of those interpreters being present.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. I know, we're huge fans of language access and making sure the courts are accessible. I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying, we obviously want this, are you saying there's been an increase in demand and that's why the line item is going up? Or that, we're keeping roughly the same pace and we just don't expect to actually have $225,000 in expenses by the end of the year. Through the chair.
And if Mr. Commons, because he pays this out monthly, but in communication, it has been an increase. And
Okay.
it continues up to we are also considering adding an interpreter to our team. General Division have interpreters on their budget. The problem comes in, we have very limited space. If we're ever at full capacity with our staff, we would really honestly have no place to put them because it's only so many limited sockets and docket stations that we can put computers in place. This has been an ongoing problem for Housing Court. We're in hallways, we're out
Yeah.
in the public, we don't have we're the 13th floor and the 3rd floor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know we're all looking for a good solution for the entire general division and the municipal housing court. Just going back to the budget for line items under travel, there's also a jump from about 1,000 to 25,000. Are there particular conferences or events? I was wondering if you could talk about that through the chair.
To the chair, to the councilwoman, yes, I am kind of requiring my staff to do a little bit more training and to diversify. So those including myself. Although we haven't used a lot of those funds, the option to have those trainings to go to Columbus or to travel outside of Ohio if possible, to have the money there. And that's not just for me, the judge or magistrates, but it's also for my housing court specialists, it's also for my bailiffs, and professional development. Because coming off the pandemic, and I'm not sure if council deals with this issue, but I hear the mayor at his budget hearings, trying to find good staff is becoming more and more difficult. And then trying to find individuals that have a history of working in the court is becoming more and more difficult because it's becoming very competitive. And so some of those things we want to be able to offer training and attending conferences and professional development as part of getting them to come on with us because everything is changing at a rapid pace.
Yes.
Especially in the housing, especially coming off of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. The next one I wanted to go to was the separation payments. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the turnover at the court. You know, I noticed we kind of had a bump in 2022, and then it's gone down in 2023 and 2024, and then there's an anticipated increase again. How many separations have you had at the court over, for each of the past couple years?
It's consistent. 22, 23.
When I took over the court, I think the separation pay was $5,000, was what it was budgeted for in 2020. And then after that, so we have retirements that happened. When I also took over the court, I inherited older staff, and not older in age, but older in, and I still have staff here that have hit 22, 25 years working with the court. The pandemic prompted a lot of people to think about retirement, and then we are dealing with, in these past couple of years, of poaching. And I know I've been a part of poaching good staff from other city, municipal places. That happens to us too, especially if they know this is a high-volume court, that people that tend to work here are very organized and knowledgeable, and they are interested in taking them. So I've had some of my leaderships go on to better positions that they've always desired, and we're dealing with that now. I have people that are resigning to become a magistrate with juvenile court. I have people that are working on advanced degrees that are now going into their clinicals. It's a lot of different things that are going on that causes us to lose good staff. We lost several of my bailiffs to police departments.
Yeah.
So, and my bailiffs are APATA certified. They have de-escalation training, firearm training, and they are good for police departments. And so what we were paying them, we couldn't compete.
Yeah.
And so a part of a lot of the uptick in costs and everything is because of that to make us more competitive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think what I was trying to get at is, do you feel like the separations are sort of at a higher rate than other courts? Do you feel like how are you feeling about the turnover within the housing court? I just, this increase in this line item really jumped out at me.
I'll say I feel indifferent. I mean, we're at will employer, and so it's how people are looking at it and the narrative they want to put to it. But I can't force people to stay, and I shouldn't have to keep people that are not thriving in their positions. So, at the end, it protects the integrity of the court because anybody that works for the court is working for me, and I have to be accountable to each individual that works under my court to the Ohio Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So if it's any kind of behavior where we have dismissed people, very rare, we have dismissed people. Can count probably on 2 fingers how many people we've let go. But when people resign, it's nothing I can do about it. If they resign, they resign. So that's where we're getting turnover, and it's also poaching.
Yeah.
For that.
Okay, but you are not concerned about this line item?
No.
Okay,
no.
thank you. Sorry, Judge, that was where I was trying to get to. I think that for now, those are all my questions. If you could indulge us briefly on an operations question, if you could explain the mental health and hoarding docket versus the mental health docket in the general division. I mean, that these cases, these hoarding cases are so challenging. And just for the listening public, if you have a neighbor who is a hoarder, it is tough. It is very, very tough. And so I would love, with my remaining minute or two, just to give you the floor on that to talk about your work there.
Thank you to the chair, to the councilwoman. Housing division by the Ohio Supreme Court cannot have mental health dockets. General division, and a lot of judges know throughout Ohio that to even be granted mental health dockets is very hard to do because you have so many processes and certifications you have to get to even get that in place. So Cleveland Municipal Court General Division has a thriving mental health docket that I think they sometimes take cases outside of Cleveland. They may get cases of mental health for Parma. And you have to qualify for that. And it's dealing with people with severe schizophrenia and those things. Hoarding has just become recognized within the last several years about being a mental health disorder. It's up there with ADHD, or having compulsive behavioral disorder. And the approach of this court is the people that we have on the docket have been repeat offenders. And this is not something you can punish away. And a lot of them came before the court and had not been diagnosed as a hoarder. So one of the things we do when they come onto my docket after they've done their change of plea and we're ready to sentence them, I order them to get an examination for hoarding disorders or hoarding tendencies. People, and it's how you approach them, because people who hoard do not believe they hoard, that they have a problem. And to become very kind of punitive or adverse to them, I have to be mindful of the public coming to speak when they're on the docket, to just the level of terms that we use, because they'll become very aggressive. And usually if they're hoarding, there are other mental health issues going on. Some of them do qualify for the mental health docket. We have one particular case that is getting probably put onto that docket because it's a split of resources. So we've been very successful in cleaning properties, keeping them clean, and then also allowing the hoarder to realize that they can't stop the behavior. We have a couple of success stories, and we have a couple of new people that's coming onto the docket.
Thank you, Judge. Councilwoman?
Thank you very much. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Chris Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Your Honor, for coming in this morning. I think most of my questions have sort of been answered. I mean, really what jumps out here is that the court is reducing the total staff by 13%, yet the court costs are going up 30%, while revenue collections are also going down. So there is just a general question about what is the sustainability of this model if we're hiring fewer people but paying more. So I guess my first question through the chair is the personnel costs that are going up by $800,000 while personnel is going down. Could you explain why that cost is so much more than the average increase of $2,000 or $3,000? I'm sorry, $200,000 or $300,000 per year?
Just quickly on the point, Councilman, is that budget to budget or is that unaudited to budget?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The salary and wages has gone up $800,000 between 24 to 25.
Well, I'm
Typically,
saying, right,
yes,
but the
correct, line
unaudited
item.
is the real spend versus budget spend. That's my question, which is, again, goes back to, to the confusion on this process.
Right. So so then maybe ask a first question is what was the 2024 budget amount?
There you go, yeah. Director, can you provide the 24 budget number, please?
Yes, so through the chair to the councilman, 56 were budgeted for. The number you're going to see in your book in terms of dollar amounts for 2024 was for 47 employees that were actually employed as of the end of December 2024. And then we're budgeting for 53 employees.
I'm sorry, referring to the
Correct.
dollar amount. The
No,
dollar
what was the
amount.
dollar amount budgeted
What is the
in
dollar amount budget in
2024
So then
for
this
salaries
is
and
another
wages?
example of why we are requesting that change for next year's budget process, because of
Sure.
the confusion this causes. But the 24 budget number, sir.
So
Hold on. Councilman Harsh, would you allow Councilman House Jones a point of information?
I will.
Councilman House Jones.
The budget amount for salaries and wages was $4,473,560.
Okay, so there's been-
$4,400,000.
All right, so there's been
$4
a
million.
decrease.
Yes.
There's been a decrease in the budget number. Councilman Harsh?
Okay, so the 2024 budget, it was 4.4 million. The 2025 budget is 4.2.
Yes.
That's consistent with the decrease in personnel.
Yes.
Got it. See, numbers are great.
No,
We
Councilman.
appreciate numbers.
Again, this confusion is ongoing, so please feel that this is not you alone. This is, I think, everybody, while looking at this book, generates this confusion.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
It makes it hard. So then, through the chair to the judge, the professional services for interpretation, the 225,000 line for 2025, I see that it sort of stands in contrast to the elimination of the court interpreter position, which is now at zero for 2025 budget. Through the chair, could you explain why, if interpretation needs are going up, you've eliminated the court interpreter coordinator position?
I don't know, we never had a court interpreter on our budget, not even sure if that's, I know we had an interest in hiring a court interpreter. My understanding was that we would have to go through the legislative process to add that position. And so it has never been a position that I knew that we had a line item for.
To the chair, the councilperson, it was budgeted, but it's never been filled in their budget. I mean, I think it's difficult a lot of times to hire these people with the salaries that
Yeah.
that we offer for this type of service. So they've been using professional services for interpretation services.
Okay, so the demand is there, it's high, but we're going to do away with the position and instead move all of the services over to the professional services column and hire, instead of having an interpreter in the court, put that under the professional services. That's the thought process, right? Through the chair.
Through the chair, in this budget, yes, that's how this is being handled. Thank you.
Okay, and through the chair to the judge, the housing court administrator, it's my understanding that this position's been vacant for well over a year, I think. Through the chair to the judge, is there a need to have this position anymore? Is it just something that
No.
it's
I'm sorry, to the chair, to the councilman. That position is a very important position. It's not one that I take lightly, so and it's a personal direct hire of the judge. So I'm being very specific in who I hire for that position. As you know, now Judge Jeff Johnson was my court administrator, and then I had Samantha Coleman. The difference between the two is that Judge Johnson was a licensed attorney, and Ms. Coleman was not. And it's very important in knowing that filling that position, that the preference of the court and the preference of the Ohio Supreme Court is that a court administrator be a licensed attorney.
Okay.
And that's a specialized licensed attorney that goes into more administrative work. They're the people that monitor all of the staff. They're the chief operator or operational manager of the court. They deal with everything from the building and construction to redesigning everything, to making sure we're staffed, to
Yeah.
making sure space is available and space is created with Cuyahoga County. They do a lot of things, and so that is not something that you can just hire a person to do because it's responsible. They're responsible to the Ohio Supreme Court, our licensing person.
Through the chair, it's difficult because we're not in the same building as you. We don't interact with your staff hardly at all. Yet we're charged with overseeing the budget. So when these things come up, the information that trickles into city council can be a little bit difficult to understand sometimes. But it does get into the issue of the turnover rate of securing long-term staff in place. And I think it just sort of it leans into the concerns that I'm hearing in the community. That position hasn't been hired. There's a lot of separation expenses going on. If I may, I know that I guess I don't really have any other questions about the budget, but I do have a question about operations. I apologize, Judge. I know you're only here twice a year, so I want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with you. When the city passed the Residents First legislation through the chair and required out-of-state landlords to have the agent in charge, the local person that could answer, through the chair, are you seeing those people show up when an out-of-state landlord is cited by Building and Housing? Are you seeing agents in charge come into the court?
To the chair, to Councilman Harsh, are you speaking, am I seeing the local agent in charge on the criminal docket? Is that what you're asking?
Either.
So the local agent in charge is something that was passed in the first residence law. On my criminal docket, every criminal case, when we talk about evictions, the owner of the property can have property managers come in and represent their interests with regards to removing somebody from the property.
Right.
But when we talk about the criminal docket, I mandate that the LLC must be a member of the LLC, the owner of the LLC, the chief of the LLC. I don't care. They cannot be the property manager. So I'm actually getting the person that created that LLC come before me on the criminal docket. And the reason why I mandate that is because the attorneys do sign a corporate authorization saying they can represent an LLC during pretrial.
Yeah.
But I don't even allow that attorney to enter the plea of no contest or guilty to the charges, because at the end of the day, although an LLC is not an individual, it is an individual.
So through the chair, what happens if that LLC that's out of state just doesn't want to come in? What happens in that case? I mean, we're certainly not extraditing people from around the world.
I have not had that problem, and mainly because we are virtual. So I have a very high participation of those owners, and I think it's good that they be present, because a lot of them don't know about Cleveland Housing Court. A lot of them don't know how we enforce our housing laws in
Okay.
Cleveland. They're surprised, but a lot of them are really interested in coming in compliance. They don't want to be bad landlords, and that's all over the world, and including the United States.
Okay. And then my last question, Your Honor, through the chair, is about the rental registry, the lead-safe certification, and then the rental occupancy. And yes, there's a rental registry, and then you get a lead-safe certification, then you get certificate of occupancy, rental occupancy. Through the chair to the judge, are you seeing people? I'm sorry. There's a discrepancy in the city about whether or not the rental occupancy requires a lead risk assessment or a lead clearance exam? Through the chair, is your court dealing with that discrepancy at all, or is it all the same, or is it a moot point, or what is your side of the street looking at, how's your side of the street looking at that?
No, to the chair, to Councilman Harsh, I know that the mayor issued an executive order regarding, I think, going to a lead risk assessment versus just lead,
Correct.
which made a lot of sense to me, because I too thought that taking a snapshot and giving someone a lead safe certificate only dealt with that in that matter. And this is my personal thing, didn't see how that was going to stop kids from getting lead poisoning. I'm very passionate about kids not being lead poisoned and just living in a healthy environment. But when that executive order came out, I had defendants that were in the process of getting their lead safe certification. Everything had to stop. They had to go back out. Some of the lead certifiers went and got the higher assessment or risk assessment qualifications and proceeded forward with doing it. The owners of the property, they're going to do it because it's court ordered and it's required by the Cleveland Codified Ordinance. And so we haven't had any pushback from people going to get, whether it's the lead safe certificate, the lead.
So through the
Hold on,
chair.
if we could, because are you finished with? Okay, I want to make sure, because I don't want to interrupt when we have speakers, but are you done?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Council.
So through the chair, is the court requiring a lead risk assessment in order to respect that certificate of occupancy, like to following the executive order?
To the chair, to the councilman, the court's not requiring any type. We just require where
Right.
it says a lead safe certificate.
Right.
What goes on to get that lead
Right.
safe certificate through the executive order or
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
required, I don't have one way or the other. I just adhere to what is the law. And if the mayor came out with a new way for them to get screened and they can't get lead safe certificate unless they have that specific screening per the mayor executive order, I don't have any input in that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I do know that they have been getting those higher assessments and getting their lead safe certificate.
Okay. All right, that's all. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. And just, Councilman, just on that note, that's going to be a broader conversation because executive orders are not the law. So
Correct.
we would have to make legal changes in legislation in order to really uphold some of the things. So to the judge's point, she just following what the law says, but executive orders are not laws. So just so the public knows that. Okay? All right. Councilwoman Jenny Spencer, Councilman Anthony Hairston.
Council President, I will keep this brief because I know the judge has been here a while and we have a long day ahead of us. I will keep this brief, promise. Okay. Through our Council President, good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Councilwoman.
And I have two questions on the staffing level charts. One is going back to the brief conversation about I believe it was the deputy bailiff part-time position. And if I understood correctly, Judge, you stated something about not issuing warrants, but issuing registration blocks. So I wanted to take this opportunity to understand what is a registration block as compared to a warrant, through the chair.
To the chair, to Councilwoman Spencer, again, good morning. So the difference is that issuing a warrant is issuing a bond also for them failing to appear, capias. I know when I took over the bench, that was the status quo. There would be a $500 bond, a warrant would be issued. I don't think housing violations come to that level, to where we should be issuing warrants. And we mostly don't deal with individuals. We mostly deal with LLCs, so that's not even an issue. We put them on a corporate docket if they fail to appear after service has been perfected. But if service has been perfected on an individual, we just do a license and vehicle registration block. So when they go to renew, they realize, hey, you can't renew because there's an outstanding issue with Cleveland Housing Court. However, there are, and I did talk to Judge Early. Last week, I got about 3 cases where there were outstanding warrants, but that was from my predecessor. So I'm interested in cleaning up a lot of these outstanding warrants, but that warrant capias officer would kind of scan through and then issue letters saying that there's a warrant for your arrest, you must appear before the court, and such. And I pretty much eliminated that since I took over the bench. And when we went back to actually dealing with individuals with new cases in about 2021.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question, one final question. We've touched on this in this morning's discussion already. Interested in the housing court specialist positions. And as you know, my office works with many of your specialists, and we do receive those communications, and they're very valuable. So through the chair, my question is sort of building off of the discussion we've already had about next week we're going to hear from Building and Housing. We want them to continue to staff up and create more violation notices and therefore create more possible cases that get referred to law. We heard from law earlier this week. They're hiring more code enforcement attorneys. I think on the City Hall side of things, it is our desire as a council and our understanding that we intend and hope that additional, I mean, it's terrible that it has to be done, but that additional cases will be generated. So looking at that pipeline and anticipating that Building and Housing will have more capacity to issue the notices, as well as all of this residents' first activity of local agent in charge, vacant property registry, et cetera, a lot more things that could be grounds for prosecution. So we know Building and Housing is staffing up. We know law is adding code enforcement attorneys. My question through the chair is 9 housing court specialists sufficient? And or if it is, it would be my opinion that just to monitor this closely, and I would anticipate in future years, perhaps there would need to be more. I would hope. So through the chair.
One moment, Councilwoman.
Oh.
To the chair, to Councilwoman Spencer. So we do have 9 current housing court specialists with, I keep hearing the number 12, but I thought we were only,
Through the chair, I see 9 here.
right. We have 9 currently, but we are permitted to have 11. I think we were budgeted for 11 housing court specialists.
It's 10, actually. Through the chair to the councilwoman, it was 10 in 2024. It's 9 this year.
Right, currently, and we do have interviews scheduled for tomorrow. But to the chair, I believe, I'm not sure why the number is showing that's how many we had for 2024, but what we're budgeted for, I thought that I talked with my finance officer, is for 11 housing court specialists. Your question was, if there's an uptick in cases. I know that says.
There's an additional one here.
I'm not sure. When we go back and look at on the presentation package that I gave to all of City Council, it's on page 10. You look at the criminal cases that are filed with housing court, and the numbers have drastically decreased. We can't go out and create cases.
Right.
That is the job of the code enforcement prosecutors and them determining whether or not they want to proceed with something. Right now, we're not struggling with maintaining dockets because even out of the 1,044 criminal cases that were filed in 2024, which is about still 300 and 20 cases less than they filed the year before. we have enough staff that the way that it's set up, it's not being overwhelmed. And then out of these 1,044, a lot of them could be minor misdemeanors, which, you can't put them on community control or anything. Minor misdemeanors or just pay a fine. The problem that we're going to continue to come back to is that it is really hard for us to be fully staffed because we literally are struggling for places to put staff. Would I love to have all 11 of our housing court specialists? Yes, and we're going through several interviews. But when we get them, we're going to be stuck with where do we place them? Where do we have a desk and computers and all of that? And then that's more money coming from us to get to, one, be in code compliance with the county building. We've even had maybe 2 years ago was out of fire code compliance because we was too far over in the hallway. So we had to shrink our desk and push them back a little bit. And it's really not fair for my staff to be in the hallways and foyers to conduct business, court business.
Thank you. And thank you for flagging that the criminal cases did decrease, and that goes back to this really interesting question we're going to be addressing with building and housing, and we've talked about with our law department and generating those cases. But thank you for identifying that space and layout problem for courts. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. I have Councilman Anthony Harrison and Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't be long at all. Thank you, Judge. Good morning. Good to see you,
Good morning.
as always. First and foremost, thank you for the great work that you are doing over at the court. No matter what the streets are saying, you are doing a fantastic job over at the court in the work you're doing, and particularly keeping and making the court accessible. The online, the virtual hearings, that's a very good thing for those who may not have the ability, the resources, or even the time to make it down, but still want to take accountability for whatever situation that they may be facing. So thank you for that. And also the kiosks at the different libraries, right? I've had residents who've utilized those kiosks across the city of Cleveland. So thank you for that. Through the chair to the finance department, just a question for you. I know we spent a lot of time on separation payments here this morning. As I'm looking through this budget, I see a lot of departments, not only in this court, but a lot of departments has very high dollar amount budgets for separation payments. One can think that it means that folks are quitting and because there's some kind of issue wherever they are working. But can you define, through the chair to the finance team, what makes up separation payments? Is it retirements? Is it folks who just have built up time and they want to cash it in when they decide to leave? Can you share that through the chair?
To the chair, the councilman, it's all of those. So it's people that retire, they get paid out sick, and one third of their sick and their vacation time. If you resign and you don't retire, you just get paid your vacation time. So it can be a litany of either people getting ready to retire.
Sure.
And maybe they've told the entity we're going to retire next year. So then we definitely would budget those. So yeah, it's both.
Okay. So part of this is in anticipation for all of those things, retirement, folks who want to leave, folks who have given, hey, I'll be here for another 2 years, right? So all of those things. Okay, good. Thank you. I want to be clear on actually what that means. And you're talking about $115,000, but clearly today that dollar amount has been an issue here. So I wanted to make sure I was clear on what we were discussing as relates to that payment. What over on page 117 under postage, I know previously before COVID, when you, through the chair to the judge, you would, with the, and don't quote me, the housing clinics, resource clinics that you would do in the neighborhood, you were partnering with the council people, and the now newly you've created the landlord clinics in addition to the housing resource clinics. Before, like a postcard would be mailed out to the neighborhoods, and it would, to the residents to let them know, hey, this is coming to your neighborhood. But I see only a $7,000, and I know it costs more than that. Postage, is a thought to get back to those, or how do you get that information? I know I see it on TV, you see it on the social media, other places, but is there ability for us to get back to having that mailed out to the community, and would this budget allow you to do that through the chair and to the finance team and to the judge?
To the chair, to the councilman, previously, my predecessors, when I looked at a former budget, those postcard mailouts were about $80,000, $90,000. I don't know how they came up with that amount. We weren't sure how they came out with that amount. So I think a couple of things that we were looking at is that we partner with city council members to include some information with us about the housing court in their newsletters. And the second thing is that we do a real heavy digital push on these resource clinics, especially the landlord clinics. We would love to send out, because I believe the clerk's office sends out newsletters and postcards. We would love to do that, but I want to do something that is really a little bit conservative, more financially fiscal on a conservative level to get information out. Is it best that we do it on our own? I don't think that's necessarily, it's a good idea, especially, when people are using that during a campaign era. But I'm a real kind of conservative when it comes to taxpayers' dollars and how this court functions.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Through the chair, I'm sorry, Mr. President. You also are chair too, but, I like to be respectful. Through the president and our chair, thank you for that, Judge. I hear you, but, people, you got some folks that don't watch TV, right? Some folks who don't have access to, certain stations or TV at all, right? There's still households of folks who don't have TVs or social media. That snail mail still is a good way to get in front of people. So I hope that as we go through this budget process and your budget processes, the budget process you go through after this year in 2025, that we consider adding that back to the budget, because that was helpful. When folks get those postcards, if folks get that information in the mail, we may see higher turnouts, we may see more engagement, just because they know that it's happening, the information exists, right? Clerk Turner, when he sends that information out, people get to, they respond partly in the way they do because of the mail that they receive, the promotions that they hear on the radio and other things. So I think trying to find a way, because this court is very important, right, that we find ways to maybe add into your budget, if not this year, the next budget, to have more ways for you to interact with the community, to get to the information out there and the things that you are doing and that you have accessible to the residents. So
I just say to the chair, to Councilman Harrison, I totally agree with you. We've had discussions with my finance officer, my director of communication. We do know anytime you work for nonprofit or just government and want to go out into the community, it is very hard getting information out. People don't look at TV, they don't look at commercials, they're streaming, and they don't answer the door, especially if they see something with housing going on. And mailings are a really good way to get it out, but word of mouth. So we are really thinking about that, because this year, it is the court's 45th anniversary this year of being established. And so we want to share that with the community, get a lot more involvement, and just a lot more education going out. I really am looking forward to partnering with a lot of city council because of this Residents First law and the lack of education on the code enforcement prosecutors to Department of Building and Housing. They know that they have these things, but as far as telling people about it and how to do it, we spend a lot of energy and resources doing what other departments in the city of Cleveland should be doing also.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll close with these last 2 points. And so just so I'm clear, Judge, I know, because the streets has a lot of things to say, and they know your job better than you do, seeing that you're sitting there. do you have a backlog in your cases?
I don't know where I put it at. I looked through.
How's the docket moving? Pretty good?
To the chairman, to Councilman Harrison, there is no backlog in my cases. That is one thing we do well, is to make sure that our eviction docket, second cause docket, but more importantly, my criminal docket, because that is really more of a time thing that we do. I am experiencing a huge lag, but that is not because of the court. That is because of the code enforcement prosecutors. And so I've streamlined my local rules to include rules of criminal procedure about when things should be filed, when things should be responded to. And I feel like I'm going back to, basic law 101 to make sure things continue to flow good. But there is no backlogs in our.
Thank you, Judge. I know there's a difference with cases over age because the court, as you said, we're not trying to lock people up if we don't have to. We really try to really help people, address the issues that they have, the root causes of those issues. And so, yes, we may hold cases a little longer so that way we can truly help them and not just penalize them, throw them in jail in the situation, is not addressed unless a person is just completely refusing to abide by or work with the court to address the situations that they have. And there are many cases, I know folks are shaking their head, however, there are cases where, the people who just don't do right, like it's a real court at the end of the day. This is not a play court. This is not Fisher-Price Main House Street, right? This is a real court. And so folks, it trips me out that you folks, because it's housing, that, there's not consequences or penalties. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on. Thank you for your time here, Judge. Thank you for your responses, and look forward to continuing our relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Councilman Jones.
I have several issues, but before we go there, I just wanted to ask some questions here in the budget just to make sure I'm on the same page. There's an increase. I know at least 1.4 million. Mr. Chairman, to the director, what's driving the increase in the cost for this year for the court?
Through the chair of the council person, a lot of it's in full-time permanent. They had vacancies, like 9 vacancies last year. They're budgeting at full staff, which is 53. So the bulk of that is in benefits and full-time salary.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I see you, but
Okay.
that mic must be a bad mic for you, Gentile.
Through the chair to the councilman, most of that increase is actually in full-time permanent and benefits. They had about 9 vacancies throughout last year, so now this is budgeting them at their new full staff, which is 53. They're down from 56, so they actually reduced their full-time head count. So what's budgeted in total is actually less than last year in total.
So what was it? What's the carryover from the municipal court from last year?
I think the budget was a little over $4 million.
Yeah, through the chair of the council.
Because we don't have the actual, right? We have the unaudited. So from the carryover, what was the carryover to the general fund from the municipal?
Yeah, through the chair to the councilman, I believe that number was out earlier. I believe it was 4.2 was what was actually budgeted for 2024.
For full-time permanent.
For full-time permanent, so that's actually decreased. What you're seeing because of the vacancies, what Mr. Gentile was explaining is because of vacancies. It looks like a big increase, but that was what was actually spent.
Is the who? Okay. All right. So then, Mr. Chairman, to the judge, I'm looking at first of all, thank you for your thorough report that you presented to council. As I look through your report, I found that move-outs, rent deposits, criminal cases, some civil cases, summons and complaints by deputy bailiffs and other parties, criminal cases, dispositions, warrant recalls, search warrants, and the corporate docket, all of those numbers are down. What's actually driving that decrease in terms of volume of work?
To the chair, to Councilman Jones, I could barely hear you, one, because the fan is going, and then I'm not capturing.
Listen, I get it. Can
And
you
I was just
understand
about
me
to
better?
say, you're like a pastor, so you don't really need the microphone.
Yeah.
But I could barely, I could barely.
I'll
hear
repeat
the
it.
question.
I'll repeat it. The question is, first I said, outstanding job on your preparation as it relates to the stats and statistics that you have given us this morning with your handout. I really appreciate the fact that all your stuff is in there, and it makes it very clear for us to understand it. So, but my question was, your move-outs, your rent dispositions, your criminal cases, civil cases, summing complaints by deputy bailiffs and other parties, your criminal case dispositions, your warrant recalls or search warrants, and your corporate docket, all of that stuff is down. So my question was, what is actually driving the decrease and the volume of work that would be normally handled by the municipal court as it relates to housing, of course?
To the chair, to Councilman Jones. So because what you just asked was a large swath in different areas, when you talk about the warrant recall, the corporate docket, the numbers are going to be down because I streamlined a lot of process. Corporate docket and warrant is a failure to appear. But when we go back and evaluate service and how service was perfected and were they properly put on notice, then we have more people appearing because the code enforcement prosecutors are locating more valid addresses to get those summons to them. And so we can move them to the corporate dockets, but as they get the actual notices from the clerk's office in the summons, they actually appear. Eviction numbers are down, like move-out numbers are down because I have strengthened our mediation departments, and we do encourage mediation from going all the way through the process of that. So you'll see a high uptick numbers in the amount of mediations we do and then the increased mediation of that. But there's also an increase in rent escrow, of people knowing that they have a right to deposit rents, to get repairs done, and the civil division, my magistrates, making sure that there's a motion to compel those repairs that the tenant is talking about. But as on page 10, I believe, when we go over to 10 in the, hi, Councilman. When we go over to look at the criminal case filed, you can see over the years the decrease in those numbers being brought over to the court steadily since 2023, 2024. We're down to the City of Cleveland Code Enforcement filing only 1,044 cases.
And this is from our side of the hall. Is that right?
Say that again.
Is it when you're talking about criminal cases coming from where? Would that be from our side of the city dealing with vacant properties?
We don't. We don't pull the cases out by ward or
Right.
anything, or how they're filed. We are just looking at, and the court can't file cases. We can only receive cases that are filed through the code enforcement prosecutors. But it could vary. These cases could include minor misdemeanor citations to M1 charges.
I see. So knowing that all of this, and of course you guys don't go out and write tickets. There's a couple of issues that I'm having in my neighborhood, in my community for quite some time. The first one, when you talk about having your people to come out, and I wish this would have happened in the case of the veteran, Mr. Ford. He unfortunately was duped. And paying a scam for property that he was living in for several years. And he thought he was paying to the right person for the property for rent. And when the actual owner of the property found out that they had someone living in their property, they filed for an evictions. And then he thought he was then paying to the right person. And being a Vietnam veteran and, of course, going through the whole ordeal of what he's been through in his lifetime, he was also an amputee. He was just put out on the street. And this is I see as almost inhumane as human beings in a more civil system that we have in place, is to put people's personal belongings on the street, on the curb and on the tree line. And I would suggest this table, that, one of the things I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that if we could look into it, is that if you're putting someone out, whoever the people who are doing the evictions, companies that I know that the different systems use, they should have the ability and capacity to put these people's personals in storage. He had all his TVs stolen right in front of him. He couldn't do anything about it as they were taking his stuff, and he was trying to stop them from doing it. There was actually no help for him. I had to dispatch people out to try to assist to hold down people from taking his personal belongings. I went as far as to contact the Veterans Administration. Initially couldn't get through to anyone to really give him any assistance. And it's in the dead of the winter. It's cold. And so I certainly would love to work with you, especially when it comes to putting senior citizens out in the dead of the winter, when it comes to treating our veterans this way is absolutely horrible. We were able to get him help at the last minute. We had other neighbors on the street that took his personals and put them in their garages to protect it until he could get into a place where he could come back and retrieve his personals. So those kinds of situations are, I would certainly need assistance from you later on after this. Maybe we could talk about how we deal with, people being put out on the streets, and then how we can more or less safeguard their personals by having a new rule put in place here in our system that if you're putting their stuff out, you have a moving company put it in storage. That's how they do it out in some of the suburban areas. They just don't just throw their people's stuff right out there on the tree lawn. So we need to start looking at policies and procedures where those people, those asset companies, or the people who own those properties, they deal with this in more of a humane way. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, but that's one issue that would certainly need assistance from the court. The second issue, which is significant and important, and then you can handle both of them if you don't mind, because I want to fire out, because I know that I may have limited time here left. So, but the second issue here that's really important and significant to bring to your attention is we have a number of properties in our neighborhood that are egregious, and their buildings have been falling down for 30 years, 40 years, some in instances of 50 years. And our city has failed to do their process. But when they finally get these people before your court, we need your court to hold them accountable. And that's a major issue for me and a major issue for the citizens I represent. And I've talked to Sally Martin and others, and I appreciate how you have been working with us on this side and have been dealing with Mr. Ford. I appreciate that most of what you've talked about is the same kind of values that I have here. But we do have businesses that are egregious and offensive. We have one on Harvard in the old Hayes House where they're operating a garbage disposal process right in the middle of Lee and Harvard, right down from the Harvard Community Service Center, right next to old Gardale's drugstore. You know old Gardale's drugstore. And so I need your help. I know that they're coming before the court. This has been an ongoing issue for several years.
Can you let her answer?
Yes.
Can I just say, I don't know if they're coming before the court or not, but because I have judicial code of conducts and ethics to follow, that if that individual entity or person is have a case before this court, I have to ask you to not speak on that, because the court cannot respond to anything that is before it or is planning to be before it, so that I'm not in violation of my judicial code of conduct, and that the court remains fair and impartial if and when this person or entity comes before it.
Right, thank you. So just to express that, and in closing, if you could comment on those things, because they come before the court. These people are egregious offenders, and for whatever reason, they seem to get off every year in, year out, I don't know who they know, how well they connected. Maybe they got the world's greatest attorneys. But to me, it just seems like, this doesn't happen in other neighborhoods. So I definitely need your assistance and help as it relates to dealing with these issues.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman. Your time is up, and I do have one more addition.
And did the judge want to make a comment? Oh,
thought
and
she
thank you, by the
already
way, for
answered
the
that.
hoarding.
With the
You
one.
dealt with some hoarding cases in my neighborhood, so I really appreciate that. I don't know how many containers. I know at least 4 to 6 containers
Thank
we
you,
sent out
Councilman.
there. So, but just thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the judge for helping and assisting us in that area.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, to the chairman, I just want to answer the first part when Councilman Jones asks about tree lines and placing things out, so it'll be very brief. Again, Councilman Jones, this court is impartial, and we must adhere to what the law says with regards to landlord tenants and writs of restitution and writs of eviction. If the city wants to pass an ordinance regarding landlords having to store property in proper procedures when they're going through the eviction process, that's something they can do. We have no authority over that. My bailiffs go to move-outs to ensure that it's a safe move-out for the property owner and also the movers. Their position is only to make sure and that they're handling the property of the tenant with care and not just throwing it and breaking it or taking it. That's the court's sole purpose, because each property owner has the right to retain their property back, and we have things in place. So I'm not sure if this individual ever showed up to any of the eviction hearings, but we have social workers that work closely with the VA, the Department of Aging, and assist with getting people immediate finding housing. One thing that I always say that the legal aid right to counsel should look into is, yes, it started off with helping single parents, man or woman, with a child and hit an income, but we have other vulnerable citizens like elderly or mental health people that don't have that right to counsel. So I just want to be aware of, I'm not sure what happened in that particular situation, but we do take things in consideration when there's a stay. If our bailiffs say this is really cold outside, this is a senior citizen, we're going to ask that this move out be continued. But the move out has to happen.
Right.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Councilman,
if you don't mind, put me
you've
back
been
on
like
just for a quick
8
second.
minutes
It's
over your
just,
time,
I know,
so
just two more things.
We'll never get out of here. We
If I
still
can,
got
because
one
this
more
is
colleague.
just one more
Can you
piece here.
talk to her offline?
I can, but I want to say this publicly.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman, he was a
Jesus
veteran.
Christ.
He was a veteran that served this country. He was handicapped. He was set out in the middle of the street. And what makes it egregious,
Councilman,
Mr. Chairman, to
we
the
gotta
judge, and I
move
finish
on.
with this.
We heard that.
They
and I hear
took
that.
his personal
going
belongings,
to
whoever the
move on
move-out
from
company
this.
was, and then they
Councilman,
removed
you've
it.
had
No,
more
that's
than
it,
10
Mr.
minutes
Chairman.
more of your time, okay?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Deborah Gray.
Thank you, Chair.
You can put me back on the back.
How you doing, Judge? It's always a pleasure to
Good
see you.
morning.
Good morning. I just
Councilwoman.
have one question. I have one question, it's just a statement. One question to the finance
got it.
director. Salary and wages. What is elected officials? Who get funding for that?
That is for me.
Oh, that's for you. Okay.
So you'll see, even on general division, it is a set pay. It's a pay that does not change. Any of our increases will come from the state. But that is the pay that the city statutorily is obligated to pay all of the judges.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. Appreciate it. And just my statement is, I appreciate what you're doing in your court, all the resources that you have given to the community, which I have engaged with you. The landlord clinic that I attended, the kiosks at Ward 2 at Mount Pleasant Library. just your service all the way around, also assisting with the dreadful situation that we're dealing with, the Shaker area, with the, with the landlords over there. I just want to say how exceptional your service and also your team that you have. I have been in your courtroom as well, and just the outstanding service that you have been given all this time, in your position, and the residents who I connect with in Ward 4 who have participated on virtual with me. We are very pleased and happy with what you're doing. So I just want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray.
Councilman Jones has asked for 30 seconds. I will allow that. I just want to remind my colleagues, after this, we have Port Control, Office of Equal Opportunity, Community Development, Economic Development, all of Public Works. So if we can be concise, if we can just, I'm just saying, if we can be concise, I know the judge's role is very important, but I'm just reminding folks on this side of the table that Jim doesn't want to be here till 3 in the morning, nor does anyone else. Councilman Jones, 30 seconds.
And can I just say to the chairman, I do have hearings scheduled at 11 o'clock, so I do have to go back on for the docket today, sentencing and things like that.
So we will literally 30 seconds, Councilman. Judge has got to get out
Well,
of here.
just wrapping it up, Mr. Chairman, that's all what I want to do, and the chairman, I appreciate the extra time. The issue is that what they're doing also, Judge, just to bring it to your attention, and it's something that needs to be talked about in the sessions, is that when they do put the personals out, they have that same company come back before the day closes and removes and takes all of these people's personals. They don't store them, they just take them and destroy them or whatever they do with it. So those are the kinds of things that I think that we should have compassion and humanity here at this table, in addition to the court's insistence on trying to put something in place where people's personals are not totally disregarded in the way it's being done
So
right now.
just quickly, so thank you for that comment. As the judge noted, I think that's a policy that we would put together as the
That's right.
legislative branch.
That's correct.
She's going to be the one, obviously, she enforces on the judicial side. Quickly, Judge, I know you got to
I
get out of
just
here.
want to say this quickly.
Yep.
That they come back to remove it by a certain time because that was at the request of City Council that were not happy seeing debris and thing on the tree line. And so that if they don't come back
Sad.
and clean, if that property owner
That's sad.
don't come back at a certain time to remove that, they get a citation from the City of Cleveland Department of Building and Health. And so that's why that is taking place. But again, the court has nothing to do with that.
Yep. Thank you, Judge. We got to roll. Appreciate your service, your time, and your thorough presentation this morning, Judge. Thank
Thank you.
Department of Port Control.
We need to change.
Actually, we're going to go to OEO.
Just kidding, OEO.
OEO, and then once we do OEO, because I'll do that part of the meeting, then I'll turn over Port Control to Councilman McCormick, and then turn over Economic Development and Community Development. But it looks like we're going to probably have to move that to Councilman Harrison into the afternoon. So let's get equal opportunity and Port Control, and then we'll make a determination on community and economic development, okay? So if you could read in Office of Equal Opportunity.
Page 89, Office of Equal Opportunity, Director Tyson Mitchell. Page 90, Salaries and Wages, 2024 unaudited, $783,637. 2025 budgeted, $967,604. Total expenditures, 2024 unaudited, $1,254,968. 2025 budgeted, $1,856,788. Page 91, number of employees December 2024, 11. Budgeted 2025, 12. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Did Finance Director have anything he wanted to open up with?
Through the chair to the committee, we have no comments and we're open for questions.
All right, thank you. I know that once again that we don't have the 24 versus 25 budget, but it does look, oh, we do? Okay, it does look like there's an increase in, once again, salaries and wages full-time, as well as hospitalization, as well as prescription costs. Could you let us know,
What page, Chris?
once again, why those have gone up?
Thank you.
Is it because of adding employees, or is it because of just cost
Yeah.
that have
Through-
gone up?
To the chair, they are adding 2 headcount, which originated from the 2024 vacancy pool.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, is this in addition to the 2 that we gave last year during reconciliation?
Through the chair, it's those 2 positions for the community benefits legislation.
Okay, so that is in addition, and this is the focus on community benefits legislation.
Through the chair, so those 2 positions actually went into the pool, so we gave them back. So it's just those 2 positions.
So you put them back into the division, but I thought we did that last year.
I think it was
Through the chair, I think that was at the mid-year vacancy pool move. We put them back in.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the 2 that we did during reconciliation to deal with the community benefits agreement were put in there. But this year, what they've done is just add them to their annual budget.
Yeah, to the chair, yeah. Last year's budget, they had 10 full-time. This says 12 because before the year end, we were able to add 2
Okay.
from the vacancy pool.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, yes, sir.
All right. Professional services, it looks like there has been no spending on professional services. However, it looks like it's at about 105,000. Why is there a line item for that this year and it hasn't been in past years?
To the chair, we've added professional services to start working on changing our program due to the Supreme Court's decision, the Harvard decision. So we are working on changing our MBE, FBE program going forward.
Okay, and we're really interested in that because I know a lot of people are moving towards more community engagement, community benefits conversation, as opposed to DEI, but I know tomato, bottom line is we still want to make sure City of Residents and City of Cleveland get a good return on their investment. Okay? I know that there was an operational hearing on this that was held already, but any questions on the budget? And does anybody have any questions on the budget? Councilman Kevin Conwell?
I do. Excuse me, Director.
I got it.
You're one of my favorite directors. You stay out there in the community a lot. On page 89, penalties collected was at 47,000. Then in 23, you went down to 6,000, and now you back up to $61,000. So what kicked those trends in, Director?
Through the chair to the council person, the penalty's going to range different amounts, particularly because we work with the developers early to try to have compliance. So oftentimes we hear the criticism that the penalties are not a lot. The penalties, I would like to say, are not a lot because we work with them and to make sure that they are going to be in compliance. And sometimes, honestly, we have to change the goals. If there's not a minority or female or small business out there who can do that work within our marketplace, we'll adjust the goals. So that's why the penalties will fluctuate.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering that. For a matter of fact, when we do, you do a good job, man. I stop and I talk. I'm sorry for saying man, Director, because I stop you and talk with you all the time and any time. I'm very, very happy the work that you and your staff and the former council member, Zach Reed, you have there. I mean, Zach used to, we had our own OEO. We used to protest if we didn't see any African Americans working on sites or any people of color. We go out there and we protest, Councilmember Zach Reed. So it's in his blood to do this right here. And he'll reach out to me sometime because I have a lot of development in my ward, and he'll tell me if it's not working or not. So you have a good person in Councilmember Zach Reed. Thank you very much. And that's all I need for that one.
All right, thank you. Councilman Richard Starr.
To the chair, just wanted to ask the director and OEO regarding to your division. I believe, obviously, the positions that you're now requesting is to add in one additional position to your department. And within context of that one additional position, is that the business process specialist additional spot?
Through the chair to the council person, at the operational hearing, we talked about the need to work on preparing these businesses for the open market, particularly what's going on in the world right now. We have to prepare these businesses for the open market, and so we want to shift a little bit to business development, but also we got a part of the CBA, we have to ignite that mentor protege program. So it's really about the mentor protege program. Some cities have 3 or 4 people, that's all they do. Chicago Transit Authority, some other cities, they focus on mentor protege, and that's where we're going to get, in my opinion, the bang for our buck to get these businesses ready for the open market, or just to be a participant on the City of Cleveland projects. So, long way to answer your question, that's more for mentor protege activation and some form of business development starting that process in OEO.
And through the chair to the director, that means there would be a total of 3 as opposed to the 2 that was last year. So you mentioned some other cities has 3 to 4 people. Are you sure you only need 3, or do you want to say we need 4 in that position through the chair?
Through the chair to the council person, I would like to just plant the seed, and start this program, and then grow from there.
Okay, definitely. And then my other question I would ask to the chair is regarding CBAs for the last year of 2024 from January to December 31st. Do you have a list, or do you keep track of how many community benefits agreements do we have in place on projects receiving more than $1 million of support from the Department of Economics through the chair?
Through the chair to the council person, I have a list of CBAs through number of signed CBAs through 2024, and these numbers will be over 250,000. The legislation requires any development project that receives over $250,000. So right now, through 2024, we have 19 signed CBAs. 4 of them are the under $20 million projects. Expand.
Under $1 million?
Yeah, 15 of them are the standard, under 20 million, and 4 of them are over 20 million, which require expanded CBAs. So right now we have 19 signed CBAs.
Okay, is there any, to the staff, through the chair, could I request us a copy of those CBAs to look at, just for context to understand more so? And then also, do you have a list of how many actual projects or have been going on in the city? Because when I hear 19 projects, I think we've had more projects in the city, and I'm definitely trying to get into context why we don't have more signed CBAs if we possibly have more projects happening on from the city. So I definitely want to look at that through the chair.
All right. Thank you so much, Councilman. I do not see any other
Question to
Councilman Conwell, Kevin Conwell.
2 seconds. Oh, sorry. This budget book, Mr. President, drives me crazy. One of the reasons, so that's a lot of different reasons, because things should be footnoted, and your strategic plan should be in front of every department so that we would know your pay range. Before, I'm used to, when you add a budget up, it would break down the pay range, how much a clerk is making, how much someone in his job spot is making. But since we started complaining about it, City Council, they took it out. They took it out. As soon as we started complaining about it, Mr. President, how much people were making, it's good for me to know. You show the cost of labor, but you're not showing who's making what. It's not there.
And Councilman, just to let you know, yesterday there was an amendment, or was it 2 days ago? But we're going to put an amendment to actually do exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
That's going to address this on Monday, because we actually had that discussion, I think, Tuesday, that we want to actually legislate to mandate that that's going to be back in the book.
Way to go. Way
All
to
right.
go. Thank you.
Councilman Chris Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if I missed this. I don't think I did. In 2002, through the chair to the director, by the way, good to see you, Director.
Good to see you.
There was $94 million in 2022 in terms of MBE, FE, CSB, prime, and subcontract, and then it spikes up to 150 in 23, and then falls back down to 105 in 24. So above 22. But could you explain that spike in 2023? Was there a particularly large contract that came through that supported the department so much, or helped achieve the goals?
Director.
Through the chair, I don't know if my assistant director can help on that. I am not familiar as to the spike in that. Do you have any context?
It's
Those are prime contractors, so those are all big contracts, those are competitive contracts, and so if certified firms are not the most competitive, we're going to see it. But I don't know what in particular contract came in there.
Yeah, we don't have the information to determine the spike, but it's just the normal contracts that come through Board of Controls, and we just add them up from there, so.
all right. So through the chair, you think that's just normal ebbs and flows? And okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Well, and then I'll just add, oftentimes, we can find more minority participation depending on the way the contracts are unbundled. You know, we have a certain amount of minority contractors in drywall, plumbing. So when the developers unbundle them, it just depends on how they unbundle the contracts to determine how much participation we get in the minority sector.
Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Mr. Mitchell. He's always been, Mr. Mitchell has always been very professional, and he's always been accessible when I've had questions concerning his department. And when I look at the numbers here, just wanted to make sure looking at this budget here, do we have enough staff to do the work that you need to have done, Mr. Mitchell?
Through the chair to the council person, I think if we add that one person to really start this mentor protege, if you think about it, we added mentor protege to the legislation for CBA, and we attempted to almost sub it out to have a different group to work the mentor protege. We decided that wouldn't be the most feasible thing, and we didn't have success with that. So now we just want to add this one position to start that mentor protege. We have, I'll just give you a number here. We have 40 mentor protege relationships in the pipeline through 24 that are ready to activate. So we got to get moving on that.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I one of the things that's important to me is, making sure that, there is a equal opportunity for contractors, especially minority contractors. And I know that you have a system where you categorize all of that. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
That's correct.
I see. And then the next question would be, one of the things that we've constantly struggled with here in the city is within the departments themselves. So we have departments that are looking for good contractors. Do you have any kind of system where you are scoring your contractors that are here in the city of Cleveland to talk about which ones are maybe a little bit more qualified than others? Is there kind of a system where if I'm a citizen or a department that needs contractors, how do we come to you and get that?
Through the chair to the council person, we currently have a database, and you see it's on our budget where we use our computer software maintenance. It's called B2G and LCP Tracker. It also allows us to do certifications. But one of the things I will say, and I'm probably going against historic precedent here, historically OEO has not taken responsibility for our database. And what I mean there is that we certify ownership. We don't certify how good you are. We don't certify, your skill level. We certify that you're a minority owner, you're a female owner, or you're a small business under a certain amount. What I'm finding now is that the ecosystem out here, when they use someone from our database and they're not happy, it causes a ripple effect. So where I'm going with this, I think we're going to have to pull back our database and take more responsibility for it to figure out a way to determine, to put only companies in there that are ready and willing to work and have a great success rate. I'll just give you this example. If a daycare wanted to get certified as a minority business enterprise, we will certify them. It's like, well, realistically, when our company's going to call looking for a certified MBE daycare? So I think we're going to have to, at some point, purge this database and be a little more strategic, particularly in this atmosphere that's going on right now. People, they don't want to use, I'll just say it, they don't want to use our database anyway. They don't want to use companies in there anyway. So if they find someone that is not successful or great, they automatically walk away and say, we're not using that database. So I'll just say that that's probably against precedent, but I am going to create a plan to kind of purge our database, if you will, and find a method to informally say that these are great companies in our database.
And then, Mr. Chairman, first, thank you for your candidness on the whole proposition of the quality of contractors that's in your piece, and maybe looking at ways and means to see who's there and who's really fundamentally effective. Now, with your Department of Equal Opportunity, not only is it issue of certification, correct, but the various different contractors are also chosen by primary contractors to do business with the City of Cleveland. Do they work from this list, or do they bring their own people? Mr. Chairman, to the Director.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question, maybe, can you hear me better now? Because I know that I be telling folks I can't hear you. So
as we get older,
yes. So
it changes.
No. These mics don't work that well. So the issue is for me, as for others, for primary primes who are looking for minority contractors, do they go to you, and do you feel that need? Is that how it works in terms of to show some equality within the hiring field as it relates to minorities in the City of Cleveland having the opportunity?
Through the chair to the councilperson, yes, if we put some money into a project, a development project, they are required to, they use our database. They also use the sewer districts. We encourage them to use the sewer districts database, Cuyahoga County. And if there's a minority company that's out there that's not certified, we will expedite their certification if they meet the qualifications. So primes use our database. A lot of companies use our database to find minority female subs to participate on their project.
So they use your database, they use the Cuyahoga County database, and then you say they use what other
Sewer
database?
district.
Sewer district. And have you seen an increase in minority businesses under your program during your tenure have the opportunities to get some of these contracts?
Well, through the chair to the councilperson,
is there I guess the question, let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
Is there any kind of measurement system that shows that those contracts, that you have maybe tracking that minority usage is up or not, or is about the same?
Through the chair to the councilperson, we track the MBE spend. So sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. It just depends on the type of projects that are out there. But we do require them to use our minority contractors in order to receive city funds.
And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, I know you say having that one person. Moving forward, is there any kind of goals and targets? Do you have something that you might want to share with us?
Well, through the chair to the councilperson, my goal going forward here is to work on changing our program. I don't want to say too much about it, particularly from a legal standpoint, but we are working on changing our program, and once we change the program, it's going to be a fundamental change. I mean, we historically been using MBE, FBE, CSB. We're going to have to get out and market the new program. We're going to have to educate. We're going to need a whole rollout of a new program. So it's going to be a big undertaking, and that's what that part of that professional service fee on our budget is for.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions for the distinguished gentleman.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, port control, please.
Page 347, Airport General Operations, Director Bryant L. Francis. Page 348, Salaries and Wages, 2024 unaudited, $27,028,864. 2025 budgeted, $30,611,742. Page 350, total expenditures, 2024 unaudited, $176,794,676. 2025 budgeted, $191,568,066. And page 354, number of employees December of 2024, 354. Budget 2025, 503, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Again, this is 347 in the book. Okay. Good morning, Director. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Council. Great to see you all today. As you are aware, Port Control is an enterprise fund, meaning that we don't rely on any city general fund taxpayer dollars for our operations. Our operating expenses are supported by revenue generated by user fees, leases, et cetera, and through rates and charges paid for by our airlines. We do receive a limited amount of grant funding from the federal government each year, and that supports primarily improvements on our airfield. And I think that's important to mention both of those points, just because I think it continues to be a common misconception with the general public as to how the airport is funded. So we did hold an operational hearing last fall where we talked a lot about sort of what's happening in Port Control, the things that we've been focused on in 2024, and the primary goals and objectives for 2025. Overall, we as a department are doing fairly well. Hopkins, of course, represents the lion's share of our operations and is the center of both our revenue generation as well as our operating expenses, so it's no surprise. 2024 passenger activity is very strong. We're now beyond 2019 levels, which I think is a great news story. It's showing that there's strength and demand in the market for people who want and need to travel by air, so we're going in the right direction there. We're seeing more air service coming into the market. That's providing more seats, more destinations for both our local residents as well as visitors to make use of the services available at Hopkins. That increased activity, of course, leads to a need to invest further in supplies, services, headcount, and all the components that go along with headcount to support that growing operation. So our near-term facility investment, we've been focusing on flooring improvements, LED lighting, our restroom enhancements as well. We are going to have a project this year where we will add 2 lanes to the TSA screening checkpoint at the central checkpoint, and that will also include a new set of pre-security restrooms. We'll be celebrating our 100th anniversary this summer, and we're working on a campaign to commemorate that milestone, so look forward to that coming mid-year. We continue to plan for the future and working with our airlines around the Terminal Modernization Development Program, and are looking forward sometime this spring to being able to share in greater detail what that vision is, so looking forward to that. And at this time, I do have Christine Gilmartin, who is my Assistant Director of Finance, as well as Matt Rosing with my finance team, who are going to walk you through components of our 2025 budget. And we're happy to answer any questions. If we don't have the answers for you right now, we will work expediently to provide that information to you as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Director. And we'll just note, we had a committee of the whole on the operations of the airport, so thank you to all who attended. Again, this hearing today is about the budget. We already had our operational hearing on the airport. And then, Ms. Odie Martins, we have the update on the exciting new conversation about the airport this spring. Is that correct? Looking at our staff lead there. So questions about the future plans of the airport, we're really excited to address this spring. We'll have a robust dialogue. Invite all council members to attend that. So again, I would ask that the questions regarding the Terminal Modernization Development Plan, please hold those until we have that spring hearing, and we'll have all the updates on that, and we'll make sure the director is fully prepared to present on that as well. So with that said, Director, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just wanted to point out a few minor green sheets that we had for this section. So 347 is a green sheet. And the reason being is we had 2024 data in there and that wasn't finalized. So we wanted to have finalized data in the book. So that's why we adjusted from 24 to 23. But there shouldn't be any material changes in the numbers. We just didn't want to have 2024 numbers in there before they were finalized.
Okay.
And then the other green sheets are just the total staffing amounts do not change, but some of the breakouts we had to adjust between categories. So you'll find that on page 352 and 353.
Thank you, sir. And Director, on that point, Director Francis, the 9.367 number shown in the book is not accurate as a passenger level for '24. Can you tell us, just for the viewing public, what our best number for 2024 for passengers is at this point?
Yes, so in terms of total passenger activity in 2024, Hopkins saw nearly 10.2 million total
10.2.
passengers.
Okay.
And our forecast for this year is about 10.4 million.
And thank you. And Director, and that is the busiest airport in Ohio and in the region. And then that is, you said, the highest since 20...
So the 2024 total was higher than 2019, but that is the highest level we've seen since 2008, which
Since 2008.
of course is when we were.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Appreciate those clarifications. Please, any opening comments? Christine,
Yeah,
or-
thank you. To the council,
Okay, you don't.
I know my director already went briefly over the financial structure, and every year I like to just make a few reminders. He's correct, we do not receive any tax dollars, we do not receive any general fund money. The other thing I wanted to mention before we went through the budget is that we are an enterprise, but we are not for profit. And I think I repeat that every year because most people are not aware of that. We are a break-even airport. It's a fully residual. So whatever our expenses are, that's all the money we take in, and then we do a settlement with our airlines. And we only really have two sources of revenue. It's non-airline revenue, which is generated by the airport in the form of parking, concessions, car rentals. So all the non-airline revenue goes towards our budget, and any revenue that we can't the shortfall is funded by our signatory airlines. We currently have 9 signatory airlines, 7 are passenger, and 2 are cargo. So I just wanted to give that brief overview of our structure because some people don't know those items, and I think they affect the budget. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that every year we put the budget together for OBM, and we go through it with our airlines because they're the ones funding it. So we do an approval process with our airlines in October. So they've already gone through this budget, supported this budget, and I just wanted to bring that up because they do financially back us.
Thank you so much. So, and just on that point, how many general fund dollars go to the airport?
How many? Zero.
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 Okay, but does the airport produce revenue for the general fund?
We do have some monies that we pay to the general fund for centralized
For services. Got
some
it.
interdepartmentals for things that are shared throughout the city. So yes, we do pay money into the general fund.
I think it's important because even before I was on council, I didn't know all this, right?
Yes.
So it's important to understand that people's tax dollars, with the exception of federal grants, federal dollars, but locally here, your income tax, your property tax does not go to the airport.
That is correct. And we do pay property tax.
Yeah, right.
And I think people are also surprised to hear that. So we pay a parking tax and we pay property taxes.
Okay.
So, but we do not receive any benefit of tax dollars.
Thank
if
you.
will.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, questions on the budget? I've got Polensik first up.
Thank you, Chairman, Director, and your team. I have a question on page 351. Under grant revenue, could you explain the major fluctuation there?
Yeah, so through the chair to the council member, grant revenue, this reflects the grants we receive in the operating funds only, not our AIP capital type grant funds. In 2025, there was a great reduction. We used to have LEO and K9, and 2025, those funds will not be remitted. They are exhausted.
And what is Leo and K9?
So
for the
Leo
viewing
is, they support our law enforcement, and so some of the, previously we were receiving funds that supplemented the law enforcement that sat at the checkpoints in the airport. We also have a K9, we had a K9 grant that, for the dogs that come out through that, for bombs and chemicals, that with the passengers, that was supplemented previously through some smaller grants at the state level.
So those are state grants or federal grants?
Those are state grants.
So so you dropped from 17 million to 545,000. That's a major hit.
Yeah. Some of the funds that were collected in previous years that were included in that line were ARPA funds. ARPA funds was supplementing our operating fund, and we've finalized our ARPA drawdown in 2024. So we've exhausted all ARPA funds also in 2024.
Okay. Then under miscellaneous, again, describe what happened last year
Why is
versus
that so bad?
this year.
Through the chair to the councilman, we include our PFC revenues that we put into our operating fund in the miscellaneous line. I do and can provide council a breakout of the revenues, since we're on the revenue
Assistant Director,
page.
let me just pause you. Please don't use acronyms. What is
Yes.
PFC? Explain, yeah, thank you.
I apologize. For an airport, PFCs are passenger facility charges, and that is the amount that is charged per ticket when you book an airline ticket, and they are remitted directly to the airport through the various airlines. And because the roll-up of our revenues don't really show airport revenues because we're following the city structure, I did create a revenue sheet that I can leave a copy for the council that does a very detailed breakout of the numbers reflected in the mayor's estimate, but at the level of an airport, like ground transportation and, landing fees and the various revenues that we actually collect. It gives a better picture.
You'll provide that to us. The interest income, do you do your own investing, or do you operate through the city's operation, through treasury, et cetera?
Through the chair.
Assistant Director. Yeah.
Through the chair to the councilman, we coordinate with Treasury downtown. So the interest is, as you can see in the book, has gone up substantially.
Yes.
And those are the balance in all of our accounts. But we do work with Treasury. We do not invest separately. And Treasury seeks the highest
Okay.
return for the
So
investments.
then I'll direct my question to the finance director, to Mr. Gentile. Are we, as it pertains to those funds that we're investing, are we looking at Community Reinvestment Act as it pertains to where we are depositing those funds? Are the financial institutions, because this is a sizable amount of money we deposit, I want to make sure that wherever we're depositing it, that they are compliant with the Community Reinvestment Act.
That's right.
Through the chair to the councilperson, I know the Community Development Department is looking at this right now. Right now, we have depository agreements with KeyBank, PNC, and Huntington are our three major depositories.
Okay.
But the Community Development is taking a look at this, and there's going to be some updates for our depository agreements as well as the Community Investment Act.
Okay, I want to make sure, because we have to support institutions that support our neighborhoods. And if they're not supporting our neighborhoods and our local businesses, especially small business, then we should not be putting a dime in those banks. And I want to make that clear, because we didn't get a nickel out of the renaming of the stadium to Huntington Bank Field. We didn't get a dime out of that deal. So all this concerns me greatly as to where we are putting our funds, city
That's right.
funds. Okay? So my other question is this. Land acquisition. When we bought the Hilton, I think it was the Hilton out there, right? What was the
Sheraton.
The Sheraton, excuse me. Where did those funds come from? Where in the budget, where in the last year's budget, where did those funds come from to acquire that property?
Through the chair to the councilman, are you referring to the
hotel,
Sheraton?
yes.
So the Sheraton was a tenant of ours. We owned the property. However, we did buy out
Well-
the lease because they had defaulted on the lease. So
Right.
technically, we had to come up with, and they had filed bankruptcy.
Right.
But technically, the land itself was already airports.
But where did the money come to buy out the lease?
So the monies that some of the monies came from the airlines, and some of the monies, I remember the breakout.
But where
the
in the
purchase price.
budget would that have shown up?
On the capital side of the house,
Wait a minute.
which is not reflected in this operating budget.
So it's not in here at all?
It is not in this, it is
Okay,
not in this book.
so then that takes me into my last question, which was posed to me by some people within the corporate community. Did the city ever was the city ever approached about buying the 170 acres next to the airport in Brook Park?
Through the chair to the council, I'm not aware of that. However, I'm not over airport development. I cannot speak to if we were approached for land.
Okay. So can anybody from Director?
Director, are you aware of the land that's the
Right next
Yeah.
to the airport,
Through the chair to
170
the
acres.
to the council person, I'm not aware of that. I know I know that as part of the master plan effort that was undertaken several years ago.
Right.
There was a scenario that looked at the potential for utilizing other land
Yes.
that was not owned at the time by the city/airport, but ultimately that was not the option that was pursued.
Okay.
So.
I will tell you, I think this was a major, major mistake on behalf of the city not to go after 170 acres, right next to the airport. To me, for the life of me, when I look at a site plan and I look at the airport and I look at 170 acres sitting right next door at 71 and 480, I'm saying to myself, where was the vision or lack of vision? We keep talking about our airport is landlocked. We're talking about possible expansions. We talk about a new terminal. 170 acres right next door, and we don't move on it. It's mind-boggling to me. Just mind. So I just needed to state that for the record, because I've had people within the corporate community ask me, say, who is looking at long-term planning? Who is looking at long-term growth of the airport, and not to go after that property? To me, was a major, major mistake. And I need to state that for the record, because it is only complicated from our position. Now we have to contend with possibly losing a major venue downtown going to that site, but also then it restricts our ability to grow the airport, And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. I don't know that not owning that land restricts our ability to follow with the TMDP or, I know this is more of an operational question, but, and I would also ask just on that point, because it was risen, in order for you to buy property, it has to be for the goal, it has to be within the mission of the airport. Is that correct?
Overall,
How does that work?
you need to have a strategy, if you will, for how to utilize additional acreage for future growth and activity at the airport. And in terms of the TMDP, our entire focus is around the existing terminal campus and how to maximize the utilization of that acreage.
Got it. Okay. Okay, thank you, Councilman Plensik. Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank my colleague for his line of questioning. He was hitting it right on the nail as relates to our Community Reinvestment Act. And so I want to kind of before I get into that portion of it, he touched upon it. I know that our airport operations, some of our numbers are down from last year. From 2023 to 2024. And we're talking about the possibility of increased cost in our budget. Mr. Chairman, to the Director, can you just elaborate a little bit about page 347 and give us a general idea? Is that just a general trend, or do we look to get to 2023 numbers, which we almost had close to 10 million passengers?
So just as a point, Councilman, we discussed this at the beginning of the hearing. That number is wrong. So the real number that should be in 2024, Councilman, is 10.2 million, which is the highest in 16 years.
So it's 10.2 for 2024?
It's the best the airport has done in
Great.
16 years.
Well, thank you.
From a passenger perspective is what I'm.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that number is wrong in the book.
Through the chair to the councilman, I also want to add that we did a green sheet on page 347 because some of the numbers that are represented in this historic data table, we have the green sheet with us. Some of those numbers are not calculated till 6 months after a year end. So the total passengers is not one of them, and the landed weights is not one of them. However, the passenger spend per enplanement and the cost per enplanement, those are not calculated till 3 to 4 to 6 months after year end. So going forward, we're only going to reflect up through the previous year, and that's why we requested a green sheet so that it's always the most up-to-date information.
But because that
And
number
final.
the councilman is reading is in the book, we wanted to clarify
Yes.
that the real number for 24 was that 10.2. Councilman?
Right, and then that just leads me to just moving down here. I know that you're looking to increase the number of people who are working at the airport. What is that total number? Because there's different numbers reflective in different categories. What is that total number of employees that you're looking to bring on?
Through the council to the chair, we also did green sheets on those specific headcount sheets so that it would be clearer. However, year over year, we requested an additional 60 headcount from a budget to budget perspective for full-time employees. So we are up. We have requested 60 additional heads. The majority of those requests will fall into the operating area of the airport as our passenger levels go up. The biggest number that we requested was 34 additional custodians to assist with cleaning the airport due to the passenger levels and the demands of the custodians at the airport. Three of them are additional carpenters. One was an electrical foreman. One is a plumber foreman. 4 of them are window washers. So we also requested green sheets for the actual pages 352 and 353 and 354. Airport went in and we put down what our budgeted headcount very specifically was for 2024 and 2025, so you could see exactly the reflection of where those additional headcounts are going to be added.
I see.
Hey, Councilman, really quickly, I'm going to pause your time, too, so that you're aware of that. I want to flag what the Assistant Director just said. Councilmember Moore and others on the Transportation and Mobility Committee were, as well myself, concerned to ensure that the supplementary contract that we had on maintenance was not going to replace our full-time custodians at the airport. So I just want to highlight this because I think it's really good that we are budgeting for more of those full-time, union-based jobs at the airport in this budget.
Great.
So I think your question is spot on, and I just wanted to highlight that because it's something the committee was, very passionate about. That, we understood the need to bring in a contractor in the short term, but that the long-term approach be to increase that line item. Councilman?
And
I'll get on the list after just to add a point on that as well.
Yeah, and first of all, let me just thank you because when I was chairman, that was one of the major issues, the cleanliness of the airport, making sure that when people use the airport, it should look fresh. It represents the city of Cleveland, and it should always be done in a positive way. When people are coming to the city of Cleveland, they shouldn't come into an airport that looks dingy, filthy, and dirty. And so it's really good to see that as the chairman of the airport, you've done such an outstanding job to look to increase that line item for custodians. And so great job, Mr. Chairman, to the director and to his staff for this. But I want to quickly move because there's a lot of questions. So I'm going to do a Chris Harsh. I'm going to do a speed move real quick. So that would make sense on the reason why there's a $3.5 million increase in our salaries and wages and $3 million in our benefits package. Now, the question I would have, and this is all on page 348, at the bottom, why is our energy usage up $1 million plus? And will we actually be using that energy, or is this just a preliminary projection of what potentially could be used? Because in subsequent years, they seem a little bit lower.
Through the chair to the councilman, we always take as best we can, the prior year actuals and project off of that, and we add an increase to all of our utilities. I don't know if the numbers, so the numbers reflected for 22, 23, and 24 are actual, and the number reflected for 25, of course, is budget. We tend to over budget for our utilities. We've had some water breaks, both at Burke and at CLE. Was there an increase in the electricity for 2025? Oh, okay. So we actually reduced from a budget over budget, but for an actual, because we were going 10% above from the prior year, but we actually pulled back from our prior year budget by
I see.
$300,000.
And I guess what kind of like, yeah, and maybe you can help me here, because I know that you have, and I would presume that these costs here are all just with water, gas, electricity, and then you have department service charges, and it seems that some of this, and I don't know if it is charges from the water department on this one here, and there's an increase of $2 million and some change. So where's the difference between the utilities amount here for water and the interdepartmental charges? If Mr. Chairman, the director could kind of like give me some light on that, why it would be in two different locations on this budget. That would be on page 348, comparison to 350.
Correct. Through the chair to the councilman, the interdepartmentals are for specific services and not for the actual like electric. So if
Well, this is just with water, because I don't see electric there.
Yeah. Those are for if we have a break and the maintenance aspect of it versus the actual water usage, where we reach out to another department within the city for assistance with those repairs.
So just for clarification, because I thought that the increase of $1 million was for breaks over here on 348. So is it on both of them? Are we're using money from 348 as well as from page 350 as relates to interdepartment charges? Because I always thought that interdepartment charges were charges that for whatever energy usages or services.
Through the chair. Yes, the water, though, does go up. When there's a break, the actual water consumption, which is reflected on the page with all the utilities on page 348, that would be the additional water that the meter is running because there's an actual leak, whereas on page, under the interdepartmentals,
That's
that would
fine.
be for the repairs done, the pipes, what have you, the manpower.
I got it. Going to Community Reinvestment Act, and I'm on the same page as my colleague. We had all that territory over there. I'm quite sure we probably could utilize eminent domain even now to look at trying to get that for expansion. And I'm not sure, as we look at our region, our numbers are up. Is there a possibility in our plan that we could potentially even look at that as a possibility of future growth? Because we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Councilman, I got a business degree and not a law degree, so I'm not going to dive into that water. Let somebody
So
else
I
handle
got
that
you,
question,
Mr. Chairman.
so-
So I'm just putting it out there, just expanding upon my colleague, because I think it makes sense. Now, CRA, Mr. Chairman, to the director, apparently we have 3 banks that we put our airport funds in. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Whoever wants to answer that. Where are the depositories for airport?
Through the chair to the councilperson, I was talking about citywide depositories. That's our 3 main depositories.
No, just specifically the airport.
Airport. What are the depositories at the airport?
Through the councilman to the chair, we have multiple accounts. Our operating fund is held with, who is our operating fund? Yeah, Key Bank. We have a lockbox with Key Bank for our operating funds. And then on the capital side of the house, we have various bank accounts for various funds. For instance, our passenger facility charge, that has to be a segregated amount. We have to keep that separately.
Okay. So just rescind my time, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to make sure that I'm clear on what I'm asking for. So you have a number of accounts right now that you deposit for a number of reasons for the airport. So there's like 10 different accounts? And is
That's
that
correct.
10 different banks or 10 different accounts and maybe 1 or 2 banks?
Through the chair to the councilman, several different accounts, not 10 different accounts. It's not 10 different banks, excuse me.
How many banks, Mr. Chairman?
I believe we're dealing with 3.
Okay.
I know we have a PNC, we have Key,
Do we have Huntington Bank?
Huntington. We do. We have a Huntington
So is
account.
those 3?
Through the chair, yes.
Mr. Chairman, request of information, unless the director knows offhand. What is our deposit for those 3 banks from the airport?
Through the chair, I do not have those account balances with me today.
Mr. Chairman, just request for information, if we could get what Key Bank, PNC, and Huntington Bank actually has we deposit into their accounts. And then I want to get to the city in terms of every time we do things with the airport. I know the city used the general fund in years past to help with airport operations and other. And now let me just say this, because I know that we did a $62 million deal back in the 90s for the expansion and purchase of the IX Center. So I know that money came out of the city's coffers. So the question is, how much general fund dollars have we utilized to support, if we have utilized those funds to support the airport?
Through the chair to the councilman, I think there's a misunderstanding. We did not use general funds
You use
for those.
subsidiary, you use all
Tho-
subsidiary
those-
funds?
Those were airport bonds, I believe.
Through the chair, to the councilman, those were airport bonds. Bonds were issued for the purchase of the IX Center, which we are still exhausting that debt today. So it has not totally been paid off, if you will. And we have a debt schedule, but it is paid for through airport funds.
I see.
It's a part of our debt payment.
And Mr. Chairman, to the director, our CFO, finances, these three banks that we actually have currently that the airport works out of, are these our major banks that we work all of our general fund dollars out of as well?
Through the chair to the councilman, yes, these are banks that we have strong relationships with.
Is there, Mr. Chairman, to the director, any other banks that we work our resources out of that are not listed here?
Through the chair to the councilman, we work with lots of banks across the city, but those are the three major ones.
I see. Mr. Chairman, just a request of information. Can we get all of the financial institutions that we have deposits with?
Director?
Yeah, sure.
And Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councilman. Under your 15. I've got Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt for a point, though. What I really want to do is just reflect on the discussion about the janitorial staff and the custodial staff at the airport, and just broadly this conversation that we're going to have coming up in the spring, and just say out loud what I think everyone at this table agrees to, and that I'll be fighting damn hard for if anybody disagrees, which is that the airport is a source of incredible family-sustaining jobs. Parts of it are unionized. More parts of it might be unionized in the future. We need to make sure that the jobs at the airport are safe, good jobs that maintain the level of dignity and support that the people who work there deserve. So anything other than that is a no-go for me. It's a no-go for many of the people at this table. I know it's a no-go for our chair, as you said, in cleveland.com. So I just wanted to reiterate that and say that out loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And again, I'm encouraged that this budget reflects that. So that's really great. So, okay, anyone else on the list? I got Councilman Harsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilwoman Spencer and I are sitting down here talking, and we don't really know. So we wanted to ask, through the chair, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about air traffic control, safety at airports. The number 47 seems to be running amok. And there's been safety problems, and there's been rumors of deep cuts in air traffic controllers. And I don't see air traffic controllers in the budget book. I think they're federal employees. They don't necessarily work for Hopkins. So through the chair, could you address perhaps briefly, how do we interact with that level of federal employment? What is the safety protocol in place to ensure that whatever the federal government does, passengers will land and take off safely in Cleveland?
Thank you, Councilman. This is operationally-ish, but we will allow it. So, Director.
There's no budget line for air traffic
There is
control.
not,
So what would
there is
happen if they all
not.
disappeared?
So,
That is correct.
Director, can you talk about who pays for air traffic controllers? What are the vibes right now, to quote my Gen Z friends?
Through the chair to the councilperson, it is correct. We do not employ federal employees. Though that would include anyone with the FAA, with the TSA, with Customs and Border Protection. Those are all federal employees, and they would adhere to federal guidelines, not guidelines as prescribed by the airport itself. So in terms of any safety protocols related to FAA, that's all within the FAA and other federal agencies in terms of what the focus is, what may be happening today. Of course, there's a lot of information out there in terms of the size of some of the federal departments being called into question, positions being eliminated. That's something that, of course, we watch very closely, but we don't have any oversight or guidance regarding.
But if I may, Councilman, you sit on various associations, is that correct?
That is correct.
So what are the vibes?
So from an industry standpoint, of course, the industry is going to always be very concerned about safety of the traveling public, because at the end of the day, that's all we have. That's what airports stand on all day, every day, is the safety of what we are responsible for, and that we are looking to the federal government to do the same for those functions that they are responsible for.
Okay, and do your associations advocate, or how does that work to ensure that Hopkins passengers and others are safe?
So from an industry standpoint, there are a couple of primary associations that are advocating on our behalf in Washington, on Capitol Hill, and certainly a focal point of what's happening right now is centering around the Federal Aviation Administration and other agencies that are related to the operations of airports across the country.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Harsh?
Okay, so to follow up with the Gen Z, it's giving worry. So through the chair, this is a specific question. If the federal government were to decide to downsize, reduce, or eliminate positions for people that currently work at Hopkins but not on the Hopkins payroll, through the chair, do we have budgetary wiggle room to bring those people in-house, or do we even have the hiring capacity to have those people employed in-house if we thought their jobs were essential to the safe operation of the airport?
And if I may add, I would say, do we have the jurisdiction as well?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Can we? Is it even an option?
So through the chair, those are federal functions. And so that is entirely resting within the federal government and their jurisdiction. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Really, really great questions. Councilman Jones has asked for 30 seconds on the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting me back on. Just want to say thank you to the airport staff. You guys have done a wonderful job over the space of several years. And, we appreciate it. There's been no incidents that have come to my attention during that period of time. So, and then you're shepherding over the largest passenger increase in the history of the city. I think that we should do a lot to, and I've said this in years past, to constantly promote the airport, marketing it. This is a great time to be able to do that. And I want to say our airport is the largest in the state. Is that correct? And so I think that, when our colleague talks about expansion and growth, we should be consistently looking at that at all times. And if there becomes a possibility where we could potentially expand, I think we should take every step and every action. And that's how we got our airport right now, is because of a council back in turn of the century decided to invest a lot of their resources into buying and purchasing land.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions on the budget for port control? Thank you. Hearing none, Mr. President, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Director.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We are going to try to slip in economic development real quick. So economic development, so while he's on his way, can you read this into the budget? Councilman Hairston, you want to take the gavel?
Page 291, Department of Economic Development, Director Thomas S. McNair. Page 292, Salaries and Wages, 2024 unaudited, $1,716,447. 2025 budgeted, $2,372,684. 2024 unaudited. Total expenditures, $2,337,308. 2025 budgeted, $3,431,091. And page 293, number of employees December 2024, 16. Budgeted 2025, 29. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke. We appreciate it. Thank you. Again, good morning. We are waiting for Mr. McNair to arrive. but we can jump right into it. Just as a reminder, DPNS held operation reviews this past fall. We thoroughly went through the Department of Economic Development. We thoroughly went through the Department of CD, Building and Housing, and others that fall up under the jurisdiction of the DPS committee. Just as a reminder, if you need clarification of the information that we discussed at that time, please go back and pull the video. And Mr. Teicher can also re-email you the presentations that were presented during that time that we held operational reviews. So we will please like to stick to the budget numbers before us. If there's any operational comments or thoughts, please put them in writing to Mr. Teicher so that way we can get you a clear and accurate answer to your question. All right? Or ask me. I'm happy to give you the answer as well. All right? And so we'll dive right into the budget. All right? Again, thank you to the finance staff. Just a couple of quick points for me. I did have an opportunity to meet with the director of ED to discuss the increase in their budget, but I'd like to hear from you all who actually developed and put it together. What was the 2024 budgeted amount versus the 2024 unaudited? Can you share that with us?
Yes. Once I get to that page.
All right, take your
Through
time.
the chair of the committee, budget manager's looking that up.
Yes.
Through the chair, the 24 total budget amount for economic development was about 2.9 million.
2.9? Okay. And we're budgeted 2.3 million for 2025, correct?
To the chair, we're budgeted for 3.4.
All right. Our budget says 2.3.
Yeah, to the chair, that's 2024 unaudited numbers. The next column over is the 3.431.
No, I'm looking at 1.6 unaudited. What does yours say?
To the chair, is that
Are you-
page 292?
Yes.
Are we talking total expense?
No, so the.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, so I'm sorry. Let me be clear. The full-time permanent.
Okay.
All right,
Sorry.
just going
Through the
back to
chair,
full-time permanent,
the full-time permanent budget 1.969.
1.9.
Yes.
Okay. And we're on page 292, everyone. 292. So the full-time permanent 2024 budget amount was 1.9 million. Unaudited was 1.6 million. And this year we have 2.3 million that we are budgeted for 2025. Correct?
Yep.
Yes.
To the chair, that's correct.
Okay, got it. Yes, Councilman.
What number are you looking, because I'm over here on page 292. Okay, I see. Thank you.
We appreciate you. All right, so can you give us an explanation of why the increase? I know that there were some additional positions added end of last year for the neighborhood representatives. Does that account for the entire increase, or is there other reasons for the increase in the full-time permanent?
Yeah, to the chair, that is the source of the increase, is an increased head count.
Got it. Is that from just what we added last year, or is that the overall increase from 24 to 29? Just the 5 positions?
Through the chair, that's correct. And they did receive 2 positions from CD for the storefront renovation program.
Got it. Okay. So that encompasses the 2 positions that we're moving over. 3 positions. The director says 3 positions that are coming over from CD. Correct. Okay. Got it. And I'm curious, the total division number of employees, budgeted 24, December you only had 16. If I think back from operational reviews, that number doesn't look correct to me. Director?
You got it?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So this is something that as the budget book came out, we recognized. So there are, we were actually at 23 at the end of last year. There were 7 positions that somehow got coded wrong as they came through and went to some fund that you may be able to, I don't quite know where it is. So we're in the process of getting that switched back over. But we actually do have the 23 out of the 24 filled by the end of the year.
Mr. Chairman,
That is largely the
can the
neighborhood
director
investment
speak
managers
into the
and others.
mic?
Pull your
Because
microphone
I'm
up,
trying to
please.
see
Yes.
it's hard down here.
Thank you. Okay. So you had actually 23
Yes.
positions filled in December, not 16. They were coded wrong.
Correct.
Which is reflected here in the budget.
Through the chair, that's correct. They were paid off of some grants.
Okay. All right, but we had 23, not 16 positions. And I looked at it, I said 16. I thought that he told, that the numbers were different. And it looked very different than what we discussed this past fall.
so-
Okay.
so, Mr.
And then-
Chairman,
hold on, Councilman.
clarification.
Give me one second for me. All right, so and that's been straightened out. So that problem has been fixed. So moving forward for 2025, that we'll no longer have that issue and where the positions are coded correctly.
To the chair, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman, you had a
Just a clarification, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm not so sure if I'm hearing it right, that's the reason why I asked the director to speak into the microphone, was we've had positions in the department that have been financed through grant funding. Is that correct? And then now, since the grant funding is not there, we're bringing them over to full-time employment or bringing them onto payroll here? Because there is a significant increase in these line items.
Mr. Gentile?
Through the chair, the councilperson, yes, they're moving from the grant-funded positions where they were coded previously to the general fund.
Okay, so these were people, Mr. Chairman, for clarification, that had already been working in the director's shop, and now that those grants have ran out, now they're being put onto the general fund.
Through the chair, the councilperson, that's correct.
And then, Mr. Chairman, then that question would be, could we get those grants back, or how does that work? Or it would be future grants, dealing with maybe bringing on more employees?
Mr. Gentile?
Yeah, through the chair to the councilperson, those specific grants are exhausted, and they're not annual grants that we get like in different areas. We're continually looking for more grants across the entire city to also supplement our budget, but those grants no longer are out there.
And then this is it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the grants that we have received, were those grants we created and generated, or were there grants from the federal government, or from the state, or from the county?
Mr. Gentile?
Yeah, through the chair, they were generated by outside sources, not the city of Cleveland.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the
Thank you,
clarification.
Councilman. One last question for me before we go to the committee. Professional services, under contractual services, we went from 12.5 to 85,000. Can you share with us what those funds are for?
To the chair, those are for legal services for ED projects.
Can you elaborate?
So, Mr. Chair, so professional services encompasses a lot. Could be for legal services, could be for project-based work that we're doing with outside consultants, right? But as we've grown our shop pretty substantially, I think we're one of the few departments that had very little money below the line, right? So these are special projects that have, and even to that point, there were some that came up late in the year last year that we had to kind of pull those dollars together for, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. And to the staff, just we'll request an itemized listing of how those funds were spent and what you project to use those funds for this
Yes.
year. Okay. All right, thank you. We'll go to the committee for questions. Questions from the committee? Councilwoman Spencer, then Jones, then Plenzik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Director.
Morning.
I'm looking in the budget, and I'm not sure if I'm finding what I'm looking for, which is, I thought it would be under contractual services, which is the question of sub-grants that economic development has typically given to Destination Cleveland and Sports Commission, Film Commission. Through the chair, where is that found in this budget?
Finance?
Through the chair, that's not in this budget.
It's not in economic development's budget. Through the chair.
I think it's in a Fund 14. It's in a non-annually appropriated fund. Yeah, it's not in.
So Destination Cleveland, et cetera, have never been in economic development's budget through the chair.
Mr. Gentile?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, not at least recently, no.
Okay. And the reason I'm also asking, and it won't surprise the director because we've talked about this as well, is Siri. It was my understanding that Siri has been a grantee under the Economic Development Department. And so I was wanting to have that conversation about, I thought that would be visible in Economic Development's budget about what the sub-grantees were no longer being funded through the chair.
Through the chair to the council person, if they were funded, it was out of non-general fund dollars. I mean, ED has some other discretionary funds that are multi-year that aren't general fund funded.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, are you familiar with the funds that are being described, the non-general fund discretionary dollars?
So economic development receives funding through not only the general operation that we are discussing here, but they receive an appropriation that we give them to make grants or loans or whatever else we do with those dollars. So that is a separate funding that we receive that the budget management director has indicated. But that should come up in another segment of our budget process, I'm sure, when we get to finance, correct?
Yeah. Through the chair to the council person, regular grant funds and special revenue funds aren't included in this.
We don't discuss this.
So that
Okay,
will not-
gotcha.
This is just the operating budget with mainly
Got it.
employees and what it takes to run that division.
Gotcha.
Some of those things are funded again out of other funding sources at ED.
Got it. And my apologies, Councilwoman. We don't discuss that here, but that is an appropriation that we allocate to the department. Was it $3 million a year we give, something like that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, about $3 million a year that we appropriate, and that's how they make their grants and support for organizations and businesses across the city of Cleveland. It does not come out of this budget. This is only dealing with the operation of the department itself.
Thank you. Through the chair, is the 3 million appropriation, will that be part of our general fund budget hearings? And if so,
No.
Through chair to the council person, no, that is not part of the general fund budget hearings.
okay, I might follow up offline to make sure I'm better educated on this topic. But nonetheless, there's a $3 million annual appropriation that the Department of Economic Development has oversight of. So knowing that it's not in this budget, I will ask a subsequent question, but not. Okay.
And to the Finance Department, can you, for the Councilwoman, for clarification, can you tell her exactly where the $3 million come from that we annually provide to the department?
Yeah, through the chair, we can get you the information.
Okay.
I don't have it with me at this.
Thank you.
Got it.
So I'm looking at our policy and research staff. It's a 3 million annual appropriation.
And maybe Mr. Titron would know.
Okay. All right, we'll follow up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I think just as a follow-up question then, I know that tough decisions do have to be made. And it was my understanding, and also through our chair to the director, the mayor was when he spoke to council on Tuesday, he was very emphatic about wanting to follow your lead on some of those tough decisions.
Yep.
And the goal would be by reducing grants to certain organizations, Siri being one example, that the Department of Economic Development could increase its capacity. So I'm hoping to ask through the chair, where do we see that reflected in this budget? In other words, how much of this increase is attributable to that type of transfer of funds, if that makes sense, through the chair?
So, through the chair to Councilman Spencer, happy to answer that as best I can, right? So there are kind of two separate pieces here. There is the staffing of which that we are setting up in the way that we do our work, and then there are that allocation that comes in, and I've never been expressly told exactly where that comes in from, but there has been, to the best of my knowledge, there has been an annual appropriation for some time in about $3 million. I want to give a little bit of perspective on that. When you think about the work that the city's Department of Economic Development does, we get a $3 million appropriation for quite some time. We have been giving about $1.8 million of that out to provide operational support for organizations doing some level of economic development assistance. I think there's 12 different organizations that we support at one point or another. That means that we get $1.2 million a year allocated to us for grants and loans for the entirety of the city of Cleveland. a place with 365,000 residents. It used to have roughly 1 million, all the different businesses throughout all the neighborhoods. Just a little bit of context, I believe the city of Sandusky, which has about 50,000 residents, puts $2 million annually into economic development. So it is not a lot of money.
Chairman, I didn't hear that.
Sandusky.
Sandusky. Right, so it is not a lot of money when you're thinking about grants and loans. And again, you guys all know, people come to us every single day. I always say this is a city with infinite need and limited resources. If you look at the entire bank of revenue that we have sitting behind us at our disposal through all different sources, I'm not joking, I could go back to my office right now and spend it all on good projects, right? There are people that come to us, I have great project X, all I need is this $4 million in cash to pay a gap, right? Like, it's not much money. So we are being forced to make very difficult decisions as we look at the different organizations that we support and things that we want to go kind of as a strategic direction as a department. You know, we brought in David Lucas, who was formerly the Assistant Director of Economic Development for Summit County. He kind of led all the BR&E work, BR&E, business retention and expansion work in that place, and we're really looking at all these different organizations and where is the best value, how can we better support ourselves. So one thing that I know I've told you that we really want to do, we have ported the storefront renovation program down from the Department of Community Development. To me, that is investing in renovating buildings in neighborhoods. That is a huge thing. If I take $500,000 and put it out, that's 10 buildings. That's not a lot, right? So that's a core program we're trying to find monies to allocate dollars into, right? Again, there's small business loans, there's small business grants, there's large ones. So it's complicated, but we're doing the best to be honest about it.
Thank you, Director. Councilwoman?
Thank you. So I think I appreciate that the storefront renovation program came up as well. So similarly, any funds that would have been dispersed by the storefront renovation program would not be reflected in this budget. This is this appropriation that somehow, that we're going to follow up on and find out what this $3 million is. And then in theory, that appropriation, there would have been an additional the storefront would have come with those monies, correct? Or how much would they have through the chair?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, no, that is not true. So the storefront renovation program, there's two parts to it. There is the signage only program. Most of those dollars actually come through those kiosks you see in and around downtown, right? There's a little revenue stream coming in. I think there's around $450,000 in pot. That's in pretty good shape. The rest of those dollars were coming in through community development block grants, right? Which made that program harder and harder and harder to utilize. And so my commitment when we knew we were bringing that in, I am taking $500,000 of allocations and I'm putting it into that program. I say all the time, this department has spent $500,000 a hell of a lot worse ways than investing them in buildings in neighborhoods and kind of bringing them back to life, right? So.
Thank you, Director. And I think our budget manager wants to also add in as well.
Yes, through the chair. So my mistake, the $3 million is coming from the general fund. So it's actually on page 295, under transfer to other subfunds. We do give $3 million transfer for the UDAG repayment subfund. There's about, and then there's several other dollars that go to the stadium capital repairs, some for Sherwin-Williams per our agreement, and our payments for Brook Park and Emerald Park.
Where is that, for clarification, Mr. I see 295. Where's the $3 million?
Let's make sure that we.
It's under transfer to other subfunds, the $7 million figure. Through the chair.
Got it. Let's make sure that we stay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We stay tight. All right, thank you. Councilwoman?
Thank you. Through the chair, would it be possible to receive that breakdown of that line item transfer to other subfunds as a follow-up item? So that's
Through the
page
chair, yes.
295, transfer to other subclasses, $7 million, requesting the breakdown of that. So the $3 million, and that's just very convenient. It just so happens that it's right here next to economic development in the book. So I'll, knowing that it's this $3 million we're discussing is not part of economic development's general fund budget. Okay. I do, though, think that it's an interesting, there is interplay with staffing, so I want to try to make sure I'm understanding that as we pivot to that. So through the chair to the director, having taken storefront in-house, let me start with that. Where is that reflected in terms of staffing in your budget? Specifically on page 293, comparison of staffing levels?
Yep. So through the chair to the councilwoman, again, we had 24 allocated to us last year. When I showed up at the end of 2023, we were sitting at 10, right? So very proud of the work that we did in bringing in, I think, what's been a great team being pulled together. Still got a lot of work to do, and that kind of got us up to that 23 that's going on. There are 5 additional headcount that are coming in as a part of this. So 3 of those are because of the storefront renovation program. Like, those are people that we're bringing on down. We also have what's going to be a really important position for us, contracts and compliance manager. And then we've got a new marketing coordinator that came on board recently, who's been fantastic. And then the one last that we didn't fill, sorry. Oh, Councilman Jones can't hear. And then the one last that we are filling, we promoted Byron Demery, who used to be the controller, into our fiscal manager position, so he's replacing himself, right? Those account for our last vacancies.
And thank you, Director. Councilman, if I can assist the Director, if you look under Project Coordinator,
Yeah.
you see the budgeted in the 2025 budget. That also is where 3 of the individuals who are coming on that he described will land in that position. In addition to the specialists, the contract specialists that he mentioned as well.
Thank you. So it looks like there's 5 additional staff budgeted in 2025 compared to 2024. When I look at total division, and if I understood this explanation correctly, 3 of those are from storefront.
Yes.
1 is contracts and compliance, and 1 is marketing.
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of, if you will, absorbing the capacity of what our expectation was that Siri was carrying out with its $500,000, where does that reside in terms of staff capacity within your staffing structure, through the chair?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councilwoman Spencer. Great question, right? And so we've been spending a lot of time thinking about business retention and expansion and attraction efforts and how we start doing there to bring in more jobs into the city of Cleveland. So if you look at that kind of staffing level breakdown, those development finance analyst 1 positions, those are what we call our neighborhood investment managers. They're broken into 6 regions. Throughout the 6 is actually I believe one of those administrative managers who oversees that group, right? But those share the regions with city planning's neighborhood planners. Your neighborhood investment manager, as you know, is Rosie Hamdan, who is absolutely fantastic. And then we have David Lucas, who oversees our business retention and expansion efforts as our Deputy Director of Business Growth. He has a lot of experience in that work. Because we have these folks broken into regions, they are like mini BR&E people. And we envision them not just kind of working on commercial Main Street, kind of in partnership with CDC. By the way, I don't know that there's a city in the country, as we start to really get into this, that is kind of looking at BRE on a Main Street level, where we're going to be out kind of like talking to and getting information from like mom and pop retailers on there. But at the same time, Siri was doing about 200 BR&E visits a year throughout the entirety of the city, right? So if you break that down into each one of these regions, that is what, we'll say, my math, 200 divided by 40-ish per region, right? Like, that is less than 1 a week. Right, and so under David's directions, we get them in. We think what this does is actually create a more wholly rounded economic development professional, so that you're not just talking to kind of small businesses in the retail type level, but you're also talking to small businesses in that 25 to 50 person manufacturing level that with Siri's.
Thanks, Director. Councilwoman?
Thank you. So, excuse me, through the chair to the director, how many neighborhood investment managers are there?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Spencer, technically 6.
Technically 6. I see 5 development finance analysts 1s in the budget book through
Correct.
the chair.
Then there's one that oversees them.
Yes.
Okay, so the 5, so there are 5 regions plus Mr. Lucas.
Plus through the chair to council, plus Cassie Slansky, she's our senior
manager.
investment manager who kind of helps them through a lot of these things. They work very closely. Both Cassie and David are on the leadership team. They work closely together.
Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair, how many regions are there?
Through the chair to Councilman Spencer, 6. The 6th region is downtown.
Okay.
That is the region Cassie oversees.
Cassie, okay, got it. So there are 6 plus Cassie, or 5,
Yeah.
so 6 total. Okay. So just wanting to get clarity on, yes, I think that I've had a great experience working with my investment manager. In terms of this transitioning of capacity, these proactive retention visits is a new practice for the city. The city
Yeah.
hasn't done it because Siri's been doing it. We hope, right?
Yeah.
Siri's been doing it. This is it should be something that's like clockwork. Is there a transition plan for Siri? Does Siri owe the city anything in terms of here's all the manufacturing businesses?
Yes.
Here's our list, here's our CRM system, here's our contacts, here's who we visit. You know, in terms of actually transitioning this activity so the city does not have to start over from scratch.
Yes.
Through the chair.
Through the chair to Councilman, yes. So one, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this, these are very difficult decisions. I, like you, have known individuals that have worked for Siri for about 15 years. They're people that I am friends with. They are people that I respect. And we want to make sure that we're doing right by everyone as we make these types of difficult decisions. So there is a transition plan. We are signing up for a 6-month extension with Siri while we work through that transition. As a part of that, they are sharing their data with us in terms of kind of coordinating around there. Again, we're trying to make this happen as smooth as humanly possible.
Thank you, Director. Councilwoman.
Thank you. I'm glad there's a transition plan. So just to conclude this line of questioning, in terms of the budget before us, the expectation is that the 6 neighborhood investment managers, one of which is downtown, would be carrying out systematic business retention visits to industrial companies to pick up the capacity that Siri has had through the chair.
Through the chair, Councilman, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Jones, and then we're going to end with Councilman Polenzek and break for lunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot that and I'm just going to start out by first just asking a series of questions just so I'm on the same page, because what we are talking about here is the Department of Economic Development for the City of Cleveland, which, by the way, I think is probably one of, if not the most important departments that we can have. And I want to start, Mr. Chairman, on page 291, talking about the jobs that have been retained and the value that this department brings in terms of those historic data output metrics. If Mr. Chairman, the Director can briefly go through these numbers and talk about the significance and the importance of his department and what it does.
Yes, through the chair to Councilman Jones. Very happy to, right? So one of the things that I was actually very proud about, you know, as I mentioned, I showed up here in 2023, we were kind of skeleton staff, lots of changes organizationally, lots of bringing on new staff, and we're able to keep kind of consistent with the level of work that we did. But 49 different total incentives that were a part of that. You see that there were 2,445 jobs that were either created or retained that we tracked in there. We do track some of the...
and that will be an increase to 1,260
correct.
Additional jobs. Okay.
Correct, that goes through there. But there was over $250 million in total payroll that was either created or retained, right?
You said $250 million?
Yes, in total payroll that was either created or retained, right? You know, you saw the total value of projects that came across, $442 million, right? So almost $500 million of investment in the city that was helped facilitated through this work, right? We had, I can get into, over 645 homes that were a part of that, right? 210 hotel room keys, right? So a lot of different work. And this happens at every scale, right? This is everything from facilitating and helping a Sherwin-Williams, or one of our big wins from last year, Oswald Companies, finding a way to help keep them downtown and keeping that core strong. But at the same time, that is working with you on like a Brown's Family Corner restaurant, right?
Thanks, Director. Councilman?
So, Mr. Chairman, when we look at these metrics here, what's the total value your department at this date from 2024 have brought to the city of Cleveland?
What is the total?
I'm looking at it right here. So, where you talk about the total value of your grants values, loans, tax incentives.
Thank you, Councilman. So total value of grants that were kind of dispersed, and I can get into a better breakdown of this, but I think it says total value of incentives is the better way that I would say that, right? Just over $38 million of incentives, about $7,221,900 of that was grants. That is a reminder, there were also some ARPA dollars that were tied up in there that were continuing to go out the door. $25 million of that were tax incentives, $25,051,846. That is important, and one of the reasons that tax schools are so good for us is because it's not like we're writing checks with them, but it allows us to facilitate projects to move things forward. We gave out $5,181,606 in forgivable loans that went out. Again, part of that, some of that, I saw Councilman Gray down there. Some of those were those neighborhood transformation initiatives, right? That was a $3.9 million investment on the Buckeye Road commercial corridor. And then $745,000 in amortized loans that went out, which are the dollars that we're expecting to be paid back. So again, we do everything from $5,000 grant to a small business up to, multi-million-dollar loans.
And let me add again, thank you, Director, for that. But please, if we have questions regarding the number of loans they provided and other operational items, we can provide the presentation to council members. And it is available. We'll have Mr. Titron. Matter of fact, we'll have him just resend it. Again, the presentation from Operation Review for CD, as they'll be coming up after lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're doing a good job over here in the Department of Economic Development. And as I continue to ask questions to the director, just make sure I'm on the same page. Each year we have an amount of money that we can loan out. What is that amount? I thought I heard you say it, but I just want clarification to make sure I understand that number.
So through the chair to Councilman Jones. So again, I get you're gracious enough to give about a $3 million annual appropriation that comes in that we use for grants and loans throughout the city of Cleveland. We also have a variety of other tools, right? So the old UDAG dollars is like a revolving loan pool. This is in, I think right now we have a little over $19 million in various pots of money that exist. And some of those are geo-specific. Some of them can only be used for certain things, right? But then that's kind of separated out from the
Thank you, sir. Councilman?
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that's really important, the director brought out UDAG. At one point, how much money did we have in UDAG, and what happened to all our UDAG money that we had in your department at one time, and to bring businesses to the city of Cleveland?
Before you answer, Mr. Chair, not Mr. Chair, Director, and that is a question that we have been talking about or asking for quite some time, as Councilman indicated. Would Councilman, if you would be okay with, I would like him to give us a real clear picture, not just a quick answer here because of our timing, but if you allow him to provide kind of written feedback to us to really give us a clear picture, and we're happy to share it with the public and with the rest of the members, if you would be so kind.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the reason why I'm asking the question because it's going to lead into the lineage that I'm doing. He could do a real brief here.
I'm gonna ask the director to give a very brief response.
Okay.
But I would like for him to provide us a more detailed response.
I agree.
Later today. Thank you, Director.
So thank you through the chair to Councilman Jones. So to the best of my knowledge, and I have had a couple people point this out to me, right? So the Urban Development Action Grants is a program from the 1980s, right? It was kind of like CDBG based on your population, poverty, all those sorts of things. We had a very significant dollar amount that came into us. I believe at one point there's probably near $100 million in that was used for a variety of projects over the course of years. To the best of my understanding, as it's been kind of shown, roughly between 2008 and 2014, right, the Great Recession, the Department of Economic Development invested about $65 million back into the city's general fund, and a variety of chunks. It could have been $500,000 there, $4 million here, to kind of keep things afloat.
I see. So your department at one point was used as a bank account for the city in order to stabilize it financially. So, and I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, that we'll get an even more further breakdown to the public on that issue. It brings me to this point right here. I think that economic development is really important on a number of fronts. It should be the first, second, and third priorities of our city to invest in your department, and because your department generates taxes. The taxes we use gives us the capacity to help more people and to provide more services. It should be like the fundamental goal of government to make sure that we have a thriving economic development system in place. And so I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we look at Ways and Means. This is a really underfunded department that does a whole lot of work in our neighborhood. And Mr. Chairman, in years past, we used to have people who were assigned to the various different council members in their wards to help with economic development, to talk about retention and retaining existing businesses and how we can bring in new businesses. And I think that, Mr. Chairman, as a suggestion, a humble suggestion, your department should be creating systems where we're going and spending time with other cities that are growing and how they're doing their economic development. And we should put, at least, Mr. Chairman, this is the way I feel about the streets program, I feel the same way about economic development. They should have, and we should be putting in them, plowing in them, at least $20 million a year so that they can start talking about real, succinct economic development happening in the city of Cleveland. There's nowhere in the world that I should go to Nashville and see them still with 15 to 20 cranes in the air building new developments from several years ago, and city of Cleveland has a better ambiance than Nashville, I believe, because we have this beautiful lakefront. So we should be doing everything we can to invest in economic development. And Mr. Chairman, and empower him and give him the tools that he needs to have. I have several people who have worked through your department, and I really appreciate the professionalism you bring in trying to get those businesses into play so that the city can give them assistance. And Mr. Chairman, I'm thankful for your leadership and the council as a whole suggesting that storefront renovation go up under your program. And so right now, Mr. Chairman, in this line items, in this budget here, where is those funds that were, is that a part of the funding formula here, Mr. Chairman, to the CFO, and the storefront renovation program is monies and in this pool, or
No.
or was it on that second page that we were just talking about?
That second page we went to, the director intends to use part of that money to fund the storefront renovation program.
And that's a part of that $3 million we
Correct.
just talked about earlier.
Yes. Yes.
So and that's a part of the whole funding cycle.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, to the director, ideally, what kind of money would you like to have to help bring businesses in here? I'd like to know.
Sorry.
Well, let me before he answers, I will tell you that.
But because to me, if I could give him $20 million, I want to give him $20 million because I think it's worth the investment.
I think nobody here, you
Right.
hear the response,
So that's why
nobody
I'm
disagree
allowed-
with you. What I would say is we had a discussion about that. He is committed to taking some dollars out because it's going to be a transition of the program to get started, to have him get a better assessment of where he is and what he can achieve and all those other metrics that he wants to review. And then he's committed to coming back and working with me and this council to figuring out a budget moving forward as it relates to storefront renovation. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you. I got some minutes left. I'm at 11 minutes, but I yield to the floor, and I appreciate. And I just end with
I think you
just
started
saying
your-
I appreciate
your clock wrong, but-
I appreciate the director, and I appreciate the work he does, and I believe in empowering him with everything he got because he's the one that's going to help us generate the taxes that's going to help us to be able to provide the service.
Yes.
So I think the investment in his department should be absolutely considered at every level possible.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Plin's is going to wrap us up, and we're going to break for lunch.
First, I want to thank the director for his help, his engagement in my community, working on the former Dave site and some of the other projects I've worked close with him on. I think he's been a great addition to the city and to the Bibb administration. I just want to say this. Under the Voinovich administration, the then Mayor Voinovich put a great emphasis on economic development, and we ramped up that whole department significantly. It's slid over the years. It's slid. And we saw it in the numbers, and now I'm glad to see that there's an increase in employment, maybe not to the level I'd like to see, but nonetheless there is. But I want to just say this to my colleagues for reconciliation. It's one thing to brag that we got $60 million sitting in a rainy day fund, but it's another thing to say we're doing job creation. So I'm of the opinion that we need to put more money in here. Yes. Now, I don't know where it's going to come from, but I'll sit down. But, you know, it's one thing to be brag, and I've become very concerned over these last several years to brag about all this money in the rainy day fund, and yet we lack this, we lack that, and we lack this. I'm for job creation. I'm for economic development. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm here to work with the chair, the council president, my colleagues. But this department needs more funds to provide job opportunities in the city. If we don't do it, then shame on us. I'll leave it at that point.
Thank you, Councilman. And my last comment, I couldn't agree more with Councilman Belinzik that, you know, this is one of those departments that has been truly underfunded for decades.
Yep.
And we really need to seriously take a look at adding more money to this budget, because we can achieve so much more than we are now if we had the resources in this department to achieve those goals. And so we'll be working through that process, and the body will determine, you know, what happens, you know, from this point on. But thank you, Councilman Polenzia. Thank you all. We'll break. We'll come back at 1:15 after lunch. Thank you.